What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today I've got for you the very best nuclear revenge stories of 2024 compiled into one easy episode. There's no need for me to waffle on here. You guys know what you're about to hear. Some of the most insane stories that span decades and some revenge that is just unbelievable. I mean, genuinely unbelievable. I've picked some of the best stories and the most insane stories for a reason. Prepared to be shocked. Let's get into it. Bogan is as Bogan does. My smoking neighbor won't quit it on my driveway. Caution, I don't speak English, I speak Australian. Bad words and stuff. Oh, here we go. My street is usually quiet. We mostly all own our houses, except for the odd one in each street that is a rental. Due to the area improving, we don't have the usual trouble that used to occur. But there are those moments that make things annoying and unpleasant, and the new renter directly across the road from me became one of those unpleasant things that needed to be weeded out. My house is on a slight decline, living on the low side of the street. So my driveway slopes down to my garage, and from the other side, if you sat down there, you're invisible to the prying eyes of the houses on the opposites. So recently, I started finding cigarette butts around where I place my bins. No biggie, I just started tossing them into them and pondered who the frick has been smoking here. A few days go by, and if I wasn't at work and on a day off cleaning in the garage, sometimes I would notice my neighbor from across the street pop up on the top end of my driveway, then turn around. This struck me as a little odd. This kept up, and I just kept putting the stray butts in the bin, but it annoyed me. Why smoke here and flick them to the bin? It's less than 2 meters from the actual bin. So I had a chat with the wife. Had she noticed anyone doing this? Despite the obvious disturbed look she gave me, she had no clue. We knew it wasn't anyone here in my house. It's now just the two of us and 8 cats and 2 dogs. They lack opposable thumbs to operate a lighter. So, option B, set up a wireless camera with motion detection, and I installed the app on my phone to alert me. This was possibly one of the better ideas for the day. I had man flu that day. Upon looking at most security cameras that were available, we settled on a Eufy, a nice little bugger, easy to set up, battery operated and lasts for ages, waterproof to boot. So I hide that little effer under the roof, pointing at the gap in the shed door, and it had just enough room to peek at the driveway and bins. Think corner of a square hole with a round peg in it, nice big gap to see through. It didn't take long to find where the butts were coming from. The next bloody day, he got caught. Brazen as frick, the idiot swaggers down my driveway, puts his butt in park on it, and lights one up less than 2 freaking meters from the bins. He smokes that ciggy dry and flicks it at my bins and wanders back to his nest. That brazen freaking literal sea bag. Had to do something, but I first gotta give him a chance. So the next roster day I had off, I synced it with his smoking habit, and I waited for the ping from the app. Sure enough, there he was, on rinse and repeat mode. Not wanting to risk startling him and have him scatter like the cockroach he was, I went out the back door and round the side of the house and out towards the front. As I approached, he had just finished up, flicked the butt at the bins and stood up, as he turned around to find me, the proverbial deer in headlights, as he spotted me. Now this doesn't quite cover it, but what felt like an eternity passed after he just processed that he got busted. And he said, "What the F do you want?" I just asked, "Mate, if you're gonna do that, at least smother the butt and put it in the bin." All this bogan trash could reply was, "You don't own this part of the strip, the council does, and you can't make me do anything." Thinking he's won the Olympic gold medal for being a C-word, he shoves past me, walks across the road, and returns to his nest. No, you effer, no medal for you, game frickin' on. So that camera, a Eufy, supports dumping events to an NAS, network address storage. Files get time and date stamped. Every time this guy then went out to smoke, it secretly took his photo, smoking and flicking the butt at the bin. All I had to do was buy bulk Ziploc bags and just dump the butts in them and write the time and date on them. If they wanted evidence, so be it, they can have it. This is what I did for a year. I collected his butts, I wrote the time and date on the bag, and I showed it to the camera for authenticity. And I left. So many butts. I wanted this, he wanted this. Who was I to deny him? 365 days in a year. Could I make it that far? The box was just about full of butts and bags, and it's only day 345. It's so close, but the stench, I had to do it. So I boiled the kettle and I made a thermos of coffee. If I have to get up during the reporting of this, it's to pee. And I'm not going to do the neckbird bottle stuff. That's just gross. So I sorted through the photos on the NAS drive and started prepping for the reporting. There's actually a website called Report a Tosser. Brilliant website branding. I've used it a couple of times before, and it took a few minutes to make a post last time. So I logged in and started. Each one by one of the 345, but it had to be done. One after the other, the cycle repeated. 200 to go, 100 to go, 50 on the home stretch now. Was that enough? Frick no. The image of his Olympic gold medal had to be reduced to ashes. He was not going to get away with this. Carpal tunnel be damned. It had to be done. Finally, after the last 50 were done, I felt euphoric, exhausted, and dang proud of myself. So I went to crash in bed. Or so I thought. Ping! What the frick? My phone just got an email. Ping again. Ping! F me. Is a Reddit post going viral? Ping! Oh, it's an email from Report a Tosser confirming the reports. Each one individually like I did. Ping! Is this automated or is this some poor human? Sorry, whomever that was. The only casualty in the strike was meant to be my neighbour. It took a few days, but one day I got the hint that something was going down. First, he got a letterbox stuffed with mail. That's weird. The next day, some angry noises coming from the house, like real loud. It sounded like a huge blow up between him and his missus. Thankfully, someone who lived next to him called the police. That shut them up for a bit. And then the notice. What the frick? What did I do? Oh, they are sending a request for the box of butts. Okay, I post them off and I'm done with it. The final day, I thought I was having a stroke. This can't be real. I've never seen him in a freaking suit. Oh, yeah, legal. They wanted the butts and he took the go to court option. Now, on the website, it specified $250 for an individual per offence, but I had no clue to, well, 345 offences. Well, let's just say he left for the day and didn't return, but eventually a moving truck turned up and out came the internals of the house. TV, fridge, sofa, bed, angry looking woman, crying kids. Okay, I feel a little bit bad for them, but considering who spawned them, not so much an ounce of regret. Eventually, I found out that he took a plea for community service and a whopping fine over jail time, upon which his wife left him. So, for better or worse, doesn't really mean anything, but considering what she had, it was probably for the better, and any interaction I had with her was far better than her gold medalist. But that was all I could gather. He's having to burn the candle at both ends for both the fine, community service, and child support. Godspeed, my rotten bogan. Godspeed and good riddance, you C-word. Okay, let me just do some quick maths here, right? 345 offences at $250 per offence. Now, I don't know if that's actually how that was added or if I'm taking that a little bit too literally, but go along with this. That adds up to $86,250. Now, that is quite a lot of money, even if it is in Australian dollars. $86,250 he's had to pay for smoking on your drive. Mad. So that is the equivalent of about 56,000 USD, which is absolutely mental. $56,000 for smoking, or 45,000 British pounds. 45 catch. Goodness me. Sorry, I've just had a look as well. Apparently, Don't Be a Tosser / Report a Tosser is a government program in Australia, in New South Wales. What the? Australians honestly do things so well. It's literally NSW government Report a Tosser. I'll put a screenshot up on screen so you guys know I'm telling the truth there. But this is literally a government website, and it's called Report a Tosser. It's unbelievable. Tosser's a swear word pretty much in England. Oh, I love Australia. I mean, look at the bottom here. If you see a tosser littering from a vehicle, you can report them to the NSW Environment Protection Authority. Fines are from $250 for an individual and $500 for a corporation, and they can be issued from your report. So there you go. $250 for an individual across 300 and whatever days it was. That's a lot of bread. Fair play, OP. Now for our next Nuclear Revenge post. Have an affair on my friend? Nope. A childhood friend that was the most empathetic, kind guy I've ever known. Did a hitch in the Navy, went into computers, and played guitar in a band. Married a pretty mean girl that liked the idea of a big wedding and a musician husband, but had no interest in a marriage. She was her family's golden child, drop dead gorgeous, and completely narcissistically spoiled. They buy land. He borrows money and has his family build their house to reduce costs. He was paying them back over time while she spent money and socialized, sometimes working a part-time job. Inside of 2 years, she's bored and starts an affair, or we think never stopped an affair, but gets caught. And while the empathetic guy tries to work things out, she makes false accusations of domestic abuse and files for divorce, with a restraining order keeping him out of the home he and his family built with their own hands. Now keep in mind, he's still paying his family back for the home, still ordered to pay for the land, and most of the upkeep and maintenance. He's back in his childhood bedroom while his wife entertains her men in that house. With some research by the lawyer, the family still technically own the house. Now, my family owned a heavy equipment business, including house and structural movers. When she went on vacation with her family and new boyfriend, we went in, jacked up the house, and drove off with it, repossessed. The structure wasn't covered in the court order, just the mortgaged land. She had legal claim to the land, her name was on the mortgage, but the structure appeared nowhere on the deed, and there was still money owed on most of the materials and the labour, so it was simply reposted. Now, the judge wasn't happy at all, but it wasn't illegal to repossess, since the land mortgage was the only thing that he was court ordered to pay. She came home to foundations, pipes, and wires sticking out of the ground, and a trashy used yard barn with her personal possessions inside. Now, it wouldn't be NuclearRevenge if it just stopped there. Since the main character has recently passed away, I can actually tell more. We had a guy we called Big Bob, and the name fits. Everyone probably knows someone that defies jail, death, is a walking demolition crew, and in fact, we called him Demolition Man for a while after the movie. Apparently, someone put huge sexual objects, this has to be censored for obvious reasons, smeared with dried whipped cream crust in her possessions, found when her dad and friends came to get the rest of her possessions out of the yard barn. There were also extreme insertions of prawn and bestiality prawn magazines, bongs shaped like phalluses, etc. Someone used her pictures in the dating magazines, pre-internet, for a paid escort with her phone number. Her parents even had to change their phone numbers a few times. Someone got those change of address cards from the post office and sent her mail around the country. Someone knew exactly when the legal separation happened, and she was supposed to get her own car insurance, but she didn't get that letter. Her car burned down in her workplace parking lot a few days after the legal separation happened, and of course, she didn't get the insurance company notification in the mail, so no insurance. And finally, someone had intimate pictures printed, man's face blacked out on flyers. The printing pointed out that it wasn't her husband at the time, and stuck them under windshield wipers at her family's church, every place she worked, all around her neighborhood. Cops got involved in that, but they couldn't find where the flyers were printed. Big Bob was an over-the-road truck driver. Everything died down when she finally agreed to let our friend buy her out on the land for a reasonable sum. So in effect, he was paying for it twice and dropped the restraining order. Less than a week after he had cleared the title, the house showed back up right where it was before. Since it was still on the steel used to move it, all we had to do was stick a truck back under it and take it back and hook it up. This was until she decided to marry a guy from a hard-working family that were doing well. She love-bombed the poor, hard-working sap. He never knew what hit him. She had a bachelorette party with her pretty mean girlfriends at a local recreation lake, and rubbed it in that her bachelorette party was going to cost more and be better than her wedding to my friend. I think that's what cued the NuclearRevenge. The flyers showed up all over at his bachelor party, at his parents' house with his family, and her bachelorette party got busted for drugs when they found several people in various stages of undress, including the bride-to-be, and quite a bit of drugs and bunches of alcohol, etc. When that wedding blew up, the wedding dress from the first marriage to our friend showed up on a scarecrow with a pentagram on the front, what looked like blood, it was really paint, on it in her front yard. No one even missed the wedding dress from the first wedding until then. Every workplace, every time she dated someone seriously, etc., those flyers showed back up. She finally gained about 50 to 70 pounds and quit trying to date seriously. She looked like her 70-pound overweight mother, but 30 years earlier. She married a fat truck driver eventually. RIP, Big Bob. You were one heck of a friend and we're all going to miss you. We will sing the song of your people and raise a glass to you every time we meet. Well, RIP Big Bob indeed. It actually makes me think back to a story I covered recently on my channel. Obviously, Kevin in a big rig. Stories about Kevin there, the subreddit, about a crazy truck driver who was just an absolute idiot. But then we have truck drivers like this, Big Bob, who's an absolute legend. It restores my faith in truck drivers, that is for sure. I mean, what a man. Doing all these things and continuing to do them and not get caught. It's legendary scenes, it really is. Okay, now for our next nuclear revenge story. Devastated teen snapped. So, this isn't my story, but it's something that I still kind of turn over a lot in my head whenever I think about it, and it's been several years. So, backstory. My very first year in college, I'm at a party and get to talking with an acquaintance or classmate of a friend. I was and still am a pretty personable guy, and so people tend to feel comfortable opening up around me, even if I don't know them that well. And that's exactly what happened here. We were both decently intoxicated, but this girl was definitely more drunk than I was. For whatever reason, we got onto the topic of wild or stupid things we did when we were younger. She then proceeded to tell me this story. I remember it so vividly. Her wording wasn't the most coherent due to her state, so much of this is paraphrase. So, a few years prior, when she was in her mid to late teens, she had a cat. This cat was her best friend. It helped her through some very dark times in her personal life. You get the picture. Well, one day, her cat unfortunately gets out, runs across the neighbor's dog as they're presumably out for a walk. The dog snaps and sadly mauls the cat to death. The dog apparently was known for displaying aggressive behaviors, but had never actually bitten anyone, and the owner was extremely defensive of it, and pretty much blamed the girl because that's what happens when you have an outdoor cat, or whatever. The girl is understandably completely devastated and distraught. Family either wouldn't or couldn't afford to take any sort of legal action at the time, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. The exact details are kinda hazy, but from what I could gather, she apparently blended together a bunch of ground meat with some sort of weed killer, stuffed it inside a hen carcass for good measure, waited until it was dark, and threw the whole thing over the neighbor's backyard fence. Short time later, the owner is pounding on the door to her house, screaming that their dog was dead and they knew it was her that did it. She vehemently denied it, and I guess because she was both a minor at the time and there was technically no way they could prove it was her, nothing ever ended up coming of it. And she never told anyone in the neighborhood or in her family about what she'd done. I was in complete shock when she wrapped up. I left the party not long afterwards for unrelated reasons, and I only saw her briefly a handful of times after that before I moved campuses. So I never really got any more info on it out of her. I don't know if she even remembers telling me the story. I've got very conflicted feelings about it. Knowing what I know about herbicide poisoning, that dog almost definitely did not die a peaceful death, and the lack of even the barest shred of remorse in her voice was chilling. I'm about as pro-revenge as you can get, and I can't say I haven't had some pretty effed up revenge plans in the past, but god dang. Very glad I never knew her well enough to get on her bad side. Guys, get involved here. What do you think? Do you think that's too far? Personally, I have to say that I think it is. I really do. Listen, I hate the fact that this guy is saying that it's your fault that my dog mauled your cat to death. That's obviously horrible, and that should never happen. I mean, that situation where a cat gets out, that happens all the time. I mean, outdoor cats do that, don't they? That's literally what they do. It isn't, you know, it's not the cat's fault that a dog that's clearly not trained well has mauled it to death when on a walk. That is the first point. It's obviously a deeply sad thing that's happened there. But to then jump to the conclusion that, yes, because your dog killed my cat, I then get to murder your dog. Personally, look, I agree with OP. I'm all for revenge. I do think that sometimes it is very legitimate, and it's one of the reasons why I like reading stories from this subreddit is because I go, wow, that's very cool. I appreciate it. I think that's a bit too far. Also, you can definitely tell that she is just like kind of weird. I mean, this has definitely been on her mind for a long time, right? And she's thought long and hard about it. But I can picture this conversation happening. I mean, I've been in conversations like this. Probably not to the extent of this, but you know when someone's drunk and they're just telling you their deepest, darkest secrets and you're like, do you really want to be telling me this at this moment? I'm not sure, but you can't just let them go. The fact that OP has said that she showed no remorse throughout this is really worrying, because surely if you've loved a pet animal that much, you would know the heartbreak that it causes losing them. I get it, the guy showed no remorse back to you. But do you not think that, killing someone else's pet who they obviously love loads as well is just like adding to the misery? I don't know. She did what she had to do, I guess. But yeah, I agree with OP. She is not the sort of person that I'd want to know well. I'll just say that. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Maybe I'm being too soft. Maybe you think that she should have gone further and actually murdered not just the dog, but her neighbor and his entire family as well. Let me know your thoughts. Now for our final nuclear revenge story of this episode. Have I saved the best post till last? Well, that's up to you to decide. My abusive mother gets a karmic response. It took 2 days to destroy the life of my abusive mother. We had a long story, of course. I cut my contact with her 6 years ago and just disappeared. I got in contact with my niece, let's call her Eva, who was 18, a while ago. My mother, Hope, 63, became her caregiver sometime after I left. Now, Eva lives with me and my husband. Eva chose to help her grandmother, my mother, financially, even after she moved away from her. I didn't get involved with it. As I said, that was her choice. Eva has left her cash card to Hope under one simple condition. Hope should notify her if she's going to put in or withdraw cash from her card. Hope was free to buy anything she needed with the card. The only thing she has to do is notify whether she wanted to use the card in other financial operations. Eva regularly put money on the card. She's also paid Hope's rent for a year in advance because my mother cannot afford it and could turn homeless without help. My mother effed me up when I was young and trying to help her, so I refused to get involved, and my siblings refused too because of her behaviour. Hope was abusing Eva's help for a while, without notifying her, and Eva knew about it. She wasn't okay with it, of course, but she let it slide until yesterday. It turned out that Hope gave Eva's card to a third person for free use, including putting in and withdrawing cash. Eva asked her what she was doing and why she's using her card this way without asking. Hope used her best strategy. She blamed Eva for being a jerk, saying that she had no choice. One of the things that Hope had said to her was that if Eva really did mean to help her, then she should shut up and do it without words and conditions, and that Eva doesn't have a right to complain. She also said that Eva is free to betray her and leave, as me and my siblings did after we used her, including one of my older brothers who hadn't even lived with her from the age of 11, and Hope never did a thing for him after that. We had a long conversation with Eva after that. I once again explained that all of this is not Eva's fault and that my mother has always been like that. I wasn't even surprised as to the answer that Eva got. I've had similar answers when I was younger. Hope hasn't changed at all. The next day, Eva told Hope that she is still waiting for an apology. She told Hope a ton of things about violation of their agreement, about her manipulations, about her not listening and not caring for people who were trying their best to support her, which is why they are leaving her all the time. She pointed out the current problem is that Hope is crossing all boundaries set, and that not knowing about what is happening with her bank card could put Eva in serious trouble, especially giving the card to someone else. I've seen screenshots, and after reading all of that, I believe that Eva tried her best to explain to Hope her position. All that Hope said was, "I understand. You're blaming me for being a terrible person, and I don't want to fight. Go away. Live your life. Feel free to not care about me anymore. I'd rather be homeless than be treated like that." So now Eva has blocked her card, and neither Hope nor the third person can use it. Eva will also not pay for rent anymore, so in July, Hope will need to find a place to live. Eva also called all the relatives who'd ever supported my mother. They are shocked and will never help her anymore, as the things that Hope told them were completely different. But apparently, Hope's been like that from a young age. They didn't know how Hope had been treating her children and grandchildren. They thought that in her 50s, she may finally have settled down and matured. They gave Eva their full support, and they advised her to run away, cut Hope off, never cross her again. They're going to stay in touch with Hope as she is their sister, but they'll never believe her again. They've also asked about me. I lived with them when I was a child, but I never called them since I turned 18, which is a different story, and I am the only person to blame. I love them, but I also didn't want to harm them, and I actually never believed they'd trust me, as Hope did insane things to me and my siblings, which they didn't know about. I've got their number from Eva, and I'm gonna call them this Saturday and talk it all through. Hope also befriended some of my school teachers that I was close to when I was a teen, and I'm gonna find their phones and talk to them too. I do not know if this is going to work, but I also don't want Hope to use them, as no one from her family will support her anymore. I'm in a rage from all the things that she's told Eva. So, in 2 days, Hope lost her family and her house. Yeah, not right now, but in the future for sure. I'm also going to try and make her lose her friends, so she'll have no one to turn to in need. And you know what? She deserves it for the years of abuse. It took me a long time to figure out what I can do, but we are going to completely destroy her life for all that she's done. I'm not sorry for that, and I'm pretty sure right now that I'm doing the right thing. I don't want Eva to be as broken as I am. Well, there we go. OP, you got to say, yeah. You've been through it before. That was your life. You know how bad it is. So yeah, I think just great recommendations, great advice that you're giving Eva. Just make sure she gets out of there. And she sounds like an amazing person, being as selfless as she is, trying to help someone that just hasn't helped her at all. I mean, fair play to her. Just what an individual she must be. But there's a limit, isn't there? Don't help someone that is kind of helpless and just doesn't want your help, or just, well, not that she doesn't want it. She obviously does need it massively, or she's probably going to end up homeless. But if they're not appreciative and they're just saying, no, go away, you're not doing anything for me anyway, let them see the truth. Let them work out and find out what life is like without the unbelievable financial help that they're getting. I mean, Hope clearly is just completely stupid, and I think she needs to see how stupid she really is in real terms. To be fair, I don't know if this necessarily qualifies for nuclear revenge. It seems to me as if you just left things alone, she would turn all her friends and her family and all her relationships away from her anyway without you even having to interject at all. Yeah, crazy woman, and these sort of people just do not deserve to be helped ever. My fiance cheated with several men, including a sex offender, so I took my revenge. I met my ex in 2012, right after I had just turned 30. I'd only dated and been with women exclusively until I came out as bisexual at 28. Let's just say the year I was 29 was a busy year making up for what I missed out on. It was mostly casual hookups. Yes, safe. And I did try dating 2 different guys for a few weeks, but it just never worked out or got serious. I kind of figured that I'd probably end up marrying a woman or not getting married at all, because I just didn't see myself catching romantic and sexual feelings for a guy. Then I met Ryan. From the first day, it was just like the only other time in my life I had fallen in love. Butterflies, constantly thinking about him, wanting to spend every moment with him. He fell for me hard too, and we became an item. Though he did say, while he considered my bisexuality a turn-on, as he had a thing for straight guys, it also gave him pause because of my desires for the opposite sex and his concern it may lead me astray. I thought about it and understood it was a legitimate worry, but I assured him that I couldn't even think about anyone else because I was really into him. Note, I knew he was the one by the end of the first month and I was in love, but I wasn't going to say these things too soon and risk scaring him off. On our first date, he admitted to me that he was legally blind due to a genetic disorder and that it was progressive, and eventually he would only have a sliver of his peripheral vision. He immediately said he understood if I didn't want to see him again because no other guy had wanted to date him and be his driver all of the time. I grew up with a brother in a wheelchair who never learned how to walk or talk due to misdiagnosed meningitis at 6 months old back in the 70s. I told him that and said that what my brother had was a severe disability. So in my perspective, his blindness had no effect on my feelings, and that always being the driver was a small sacrifice just to be with him. The following years were bliss. We brought out the best in each other. My family, who was surprised but very supportive when I came out, adored Ryan and treated him like family and said that I acted happier since we'd been together. When I met him, he was working part-time in retail and had done very poorly in high school because he lost a lot of his confidence as his vision deteriorated. I told him that one thing that I did insist on was that he do something with his life because he had too much to offer and that I would help. He said that he wanted to be a teacher but didn't think someone with limited vision could teach. Nonsense. So I put him through community college for 2 years, then 2.5 years of a local university, and finally the 1-year teacher certification program as required by California. I drove countless miles and paid hundreds in public transportation costs for him. never blinking an eye or complaining. We'd been together for 7.5 years and were engaged to be married in October by the time he was in his last semester of his teaching certification, which involved him student teaching at his former high school with his favourite teacher from his days in school. Then the pandemic hits and schools closed. Fortunately, he'd had enough hours in the classroom that he would still qualify to be certified after the governor issued a waiver via executive order. On the third day of the stay-at-home order in March, my life crumbled when I innocently found out he had cheated on me with an ex, all because he handed his phone to me to show me something on Instagram. I accidentally fat-thumbled the back arrow when he gave it to me, taking me back to a list of all his messages. I looked and recognized the name of his ex as the second message dated a week ago. I clicked on it and my heart sank. Directions to my house, pictures, dirty talk, and reassuring him not to worry about me because he had my location on Find My Friends just in case I came home from work. I immediately started screaming, demanding to know everything, and he admitted to having his ex over twice for sex and that they didn't use protection. His ex was engaged to his girlfriend during this, adding another victim. Then he admitted to sleeping with his straight but curious, recently single cousin by marriage. Okay, by marriage, but still, it's your cousin. Twice. Again, no protection. Finally, he admitted to sleeping with a supposedly straight guy he and many of my cousins went to school with, who I told Ryan I really didn't like or want them talking because I didn't trust him after what I'd read about him. Since they were never close friends, I didn't feel like this was a big sacrifice or that I was being too controlling, and I assumed that he knew why I and all my cousins felt that way, but didn't bother repeating it. The reason was, after high school at age 20, this guy was convicted of sexual assault and penetration with a foreign object against a 16-year-old girl and had gone to jail, required to register as a sex offender for life. Apparently, my ex was the only person in his graduating class that hadn't heard that news. All of this happened in my home while I was working. We spent the whole weekend crying, with me asking over and over why, and him repeatedly crying and saying he just didn't know and that he felt terrible. Monday comes around and anger started being as common as sadness, and I made a comment that said I was going to pull all the phone records going back the 3 years that AT&T kept them for a fee. Only when he heard that did he then admit to one more guy, some random named Frankie off the gay hookup app Grindr, who was the first guy he cheated with and continued to casually hook up with for nearly 2 years, the last time being in February, the month before this got outed. Okay, so this guy isn't sorry at all, realistically, is he? I know it's cliche, but he's sorry he got caught, not sorry that he did it. What a disgraceful human being. He told me how it started. Get this. It was the day after his graduation with his BA in May 2018, and he was drunk from celebrating and wanted to have sex. I too had been celebrating with him and said I was too drunk to perform and said I'd make it up the next day, then passed out asleep on the couch. Apparently he was then angry horny because he downloaded Grindr, chatted with this Frankie fellow, and arranged to have sex in his car in a church parking lot across the street from our condo, which happens to be across the street from a school. This fact is important for later. All the while, I slept on the couch. How grimy is that? All the times they hooked up after that was again in my condo while I was working or visiting a friend for the night up the coast. He used to love going, but started saying he couldn't occasionally because of homework and studying. I absolutely lost it. I told him to get in the car and I drove him to his family's house so he could tell them what he did, so they understood why he was moving back into their house. While he was in the house, I was in the driveway on the phone with AT&T, ordering those 3 years worth of detailed call and text logs. Then I made an appointment to be screened for STIs. I suspended his service until he could figure out how to pay for his own dang phone. Then I temporarily changed all his passwords on the social media accounts he cheated with me on, and to make sure he couldn't hide more evidence, so only I would have access to his cloud. We shared each other's passwords on his suggestions years before. I also called the bank and issued a stop payment on his final tuition check that I had sent to the certification program the week before and hadn't hit the bank yet. Before deleting his social media, except Facebook, I took screenshots of the entire Instagram conversation with his ex and mailed the conversation to his fiancée, who deserved to know so she could see a doctor and get tested too. His family was very religious and had kicked him out in high school for 3 days when he tried to admit he was bi, and only took him back in when he took it back. Needless to say, she ended it. He got kicked out. 1 down. Ryan came back out to the car and we went home. I took his house key and told him to say goodbye to our 3 pets and get packing. The entire time he packed, I studied those phone records to find out dates, times, and if there was anyone else he was leaving out. He answered every question I asked, and it was then that I discovered that the sex offender and he had only had oral sex in my home, and that the actual sex was in the same parking lot he screwed the Frankie guy in. The wheels started turning, and the next day I walked over to the church and sure enough spotted a camera. I spoke to a secretary, a sweet old lady at the church, and informed them about a registered sex offender having sex in their lot, and that not only was it a violation of his parole for indecent exposure, but that he was not allowed to be that close to a school, and I provided the dates. I was in luck. They had a digital 2-year loop system that started deleting day by day after it had been retained for 2 years. It was April 2020, and he first cheated with Frankie in May 2018, and the sex offender was in April 2019. I told them I was filing a police report and that probation would require a copy of it eventually. They said they'd saved the file and allowed me a thumb drive of both days to submit with my police report. Within a month, the sex offender was locked up again. 2 down. I also filed a police report against the Frankie guy. The police said it was a relatively minor infraction, but since it was across from a school playground and skate park, they would follow up, but there would be no jail time. I researched the heck out of Frankie, and I called him to confront him. He was smug and admitted to knowing about me the whole time, but what he didn't know is that I had found out he had a job that required a security clearance, and he had several judgments against him, and collection agencies had been looking for him. That's the best money I ever spent on a data collection site. I didn't know why they couldn't find him and just garnish his wages, but it ends up he was Hispanic and had 2 last names and was a junior, plus he frequently went by his middle name, Francisco, Frankie for short, so he got lost in the paperwork confusion. I sent a letter to the collection agencies providing his employer and current location and contact info, and then sent a copy of the police report about misdemeanor indecent exposure for which he pled guilty, and it was a fine with community service, not considered a sex crime. His wages did get garnished, but only for 2 paychecks because the misdemeanor was enough for him to lose his security clearance and get fired. 3 down. Then I contacted Ryan's family on his mother's side, pretending to be him from his Facebook account, making sure they knew he had screwed his cousin. It spread through the family like wildfire, and soon his cousin was contacting me because he couldn't get a hold of Ryan to ask why he would expose what they did. I just laughed and said, you shouldn't screw your cousins, especially when they're engaged, and that he'd messed around in my house, so now it was my turn for payback. 4 down. Lastly, I'd already stopped payment, but since he was so close to finishing, I was sure his family would bail him out and pay the university. Like I said, indecent exposure is usually a slap on the wrist type misdemeanor. However, I remembered some of the paperwork he signed to be a mandated reporter, that you could lose teaching certification for documented acts of moral turpitude. I sent a copy of both police reports from the parking lot with still shots from the security footage, clearly showing Ryan's face, to the school district that he'd been a student teacher at, and a copy to the Commission on Teacher Credentials. 5th and final down. Admittedly, I did all of this out of anger, but he shattered my sense of self-worth and made me incredibly bitter and untrusting after years of being generous and supporting him. Everywhere I looked in the town, I thought of Ryan and the cheating. I felt a terrible energy in my condo, knowing it all happened there. I stayed for 9 months and watched all 5 of their lives self-destruct. Then I sold my condo, making a nice profit, and relocated to the PNW to start over. One thing that is sad that I found out just recently is that his ex, whose fiance broke up with him, ended up unaliving themselves several months after I moved. It's too bad that his family was so close-minded to turn on their own son, but in the end, it isn't my fault that he cheated on his fiancée by coming into my home at my fiance's invitation to cheat. Unaliving is never the answer to one's problems, and I hope the fiance he cheated on doesn't blame herself and that only his family does, as they should. And there we go. What a start to this episode. I mean, goodness me, going through each and every individual cheater one by one, just shutting them down, ruining their lives. Phenomenal stuff. I do have to say, yeah, you know, the last person unaliving themselves is a shame. I agree with you though, it's not your fault. I mean, you're allowed to do that. I don't think really did anything wrong by outing the fact that he cheated. That's fine. Yes, I agree. It's more on his family, and they have to look at themselves and wonder why their son did that to themselves. Yes, it's because of them and their views and their inability to accept someone for being the way they are. So apart from that, which is very sad, it was phenomenal. It really was. I mean, it went from like being so sad to so calculated, then just the complete savagery. You did the maths pretty much on every one of these people. No one deserves to be betrayed and cheated on like you did. And a lot of the time, people do tend to get away with it. Or if they're even caught, they just get broken up with, or they move out and that's it. No real repercussions. But you made sure that everyone there learned their lesson. And that is the definition of nuclear. Going through them one by one and just sorting them out. So good. Okay, now moving on to the second story of nuclear revenge in this episode. My neighbor destroyed another neighbor's business because she abused kittens. So, a few months back, I found my cat Gigi on the streets. He was so young, maybe a couple of months old, so I felt as if I couldn't just leave him there. He also looked extremely malnourished, and it was so heartbreaking to see. Just in case he was an escaped kitten, I posted flyers all over the neighborhood and on lost pet forums for my area. Absolutely no one contacted me, so I took him to the vet and registered him as my pet, vaccinated, chipped, and neutered when he was old enough. When I first found him, I thought he was a Russian blue. He looked exactly like them, down to the face shape and eye color. As he got older, the stripes he had never faded like breeders said they would, so I abandoned the idea that he is a Russian blue. Besides, it's downright preposterous that an expensive breed of cat would be abandoned like that, right? Out of curiosity, even though he is legally my cat now, I decided to check the neighborhood watch and lost pet forums. That is when I found a post from one of my neighbors going absolutely nuclear on another neighbor, exposing her and her business. I'll call the nuclear neighbor Daisy and the total waste of air Karen. From what I read on Daisy's post, she feeds the local strays. There's one in particular, a tabby, that liked to hang out in her lawn. Her next door neighbor, Karen, is a cat breeder, specifically for Russian blue cats. Karen hates Daisy because she feeds the strays and was worried about them ruining her business. One day, Daisy hears screaming coming from Karen's house, sounds of objects being thrown, general commotion. She stepped outside, ready to call the police, believing it to be a domestic disturbance. Instead, she watched Karen chase the tabby out of her house, smacking it with a broom and trying to kill it. They get into an argument, which prompts Daisy to write about it for the first time on the neighborhood watch. About 4 to 5 months later, there is more disturbance at Karen's house. Yelling, screaming, bumping around. Once again, Daisy steps outside to see if they need help and sees Karen angrily stomping out of her house with a box. She walks down the street a bit and Daisy discreetly follows her. Karen reaches the tiny playground in the neighborhood and throws the box into the bushes. Daisy goes to the bush and sees a bunch of kittens in the box, around the box, and in the bushes. She tries to grab them all, but a couple run off and she can't catch them. Daisy is fuming. She brings the kittens that she managed to catch home and goes to confront Karen. Karen is also mad at her, blaming Daisy's feeding of the strays for losing her thousands of dollars. The tabby that hangs out around the house apparently got Karen's cat pregnant, and she couldn't sell the kittens because they're not purebred, and it's obvious. After their argument, Daisy takes the kittens to the vet, and most have injuries, broken tails, injured ribs, etc. Once Daisy got home, she reported Karen for animal abuse, and then started to expose Karen online. Everywhere she could, Daisy told people not to buy from Karen, even going onto her breeder page and exposing what she did to the kittens. From what she knows, Karen completely lost her business. Despite this, every month Daisy will post about Karen and warn people not to buy from her, just in case. Now, I'm not sure if Gigi is a part of the kittens that came from that. He could very well be just a grey tabby from Strays, but the timeline matches up. I'm not sure if Karen is or is going to face legal charges for the abuse she did to those kittens, but I sure dang hope so. Now, while this story might not necessarily be revenge in the normal sense, as in like human to human, Daisy's not really getting revenge because nothing was necessarily done to her, it is revenge for these kittens who have been abused or just chucked out because they're not purebred. And oh no, my cat, who I have to look after so much because they make me loads of money when they have children, had whatever with another. I mean, I'm explaining this horribly, by the way. This is the sort of insight you get into me if you watch and listen to the end of episodes. I'm not cutting this out, by the way. This is staying in. Right there, I was thinking of another way to say cats having sex with a random cat, and I couldn't think about it on the fly. And normally I cut this out, but it's staying in, my friends, just for you, just to reward your patience. Nonetheless, do you get what I'm saying? Oh, my cat was let out of my house, had sex with some random cat who's being fed by a stranger / neighbor. Oh, you shouldn't be feeding stray cats. You should let them die. Therefore, my cat's children, I'm going to let them die as well. It's only right, said no one ever. And that right there is a little insight, guys, into the mind and thinking of a crazy Karen. I've been calling my sister by her full given name when she dead names my niece. My brother's kid, who is a 22-year-old woman, came out as trans on her 21st birthday about a year ago and changed her name from Lance to Lacey. Most of our family accepted it, and the ones who didn't weren't close anyway, except our sister, Eva, who is 45. We are a Native American family with a lot of creative names, and my sister's birth name is something close to Evangeline, but she decided to go by Eva after a white kid said her name was rezzed out, i.e. a low-class or stereotypical name from an Indian reservation. She's insisted on Eva for about 35 years, and we all obliged. Now, she's regularly been calling my trans niece by her dead name Lance since she came out as trans, so I started calling her Evangeline, which she hates. The whole family caught on and have only been referring to her as Evangeline for about a year now, and she is furious every time she comes to family events. Recently, she's been calling me by my full first name to bother me. My first name is a portmanteau hyphenation of my mum's 4 sisters' names. Something like Alexiana Dorotheic, but wackier, wow. People have always called me AD or Lexi, or my brothers called me Dodo since he was a kid. I love my full first names, but it's cumbersome to use an 8-syllable name regularly. Well, my full name caught on with family and friends. Just despite Evangeline, we have all reverted back to our full names instead of nicknames. Our dad is no longer Frank, he's Franklin. Our mum no longer Ros, she is Rosalind. Brother no longer Nate, he's Nathaniel. My sister-in-law is no longer Kate, she's Catherine, etc. This has truly driven Evangeline away, which was the plan in the first place. Lacey makes for better company, so good riddance to one trashy sister. You know what? I just despise people like this. Coming out as trans is probably one of the most courageous things you can possibly do, and it must be an extremely difficult thing for somebody to do, made even worse by people like this, who just don't accept it clearly at all, and still sadly use their dead name to probably make them question whether they even should have come out in the first place. I mean, the only thing that Lacey can do is just ignore Eva as much as she can. And I think, to be fair, OP, with your help and the rest of the families, she has been able to do this, but it's just so ignorant, right? Eva knows what she's doing here. There's no doubt about it. The fact of the matter is, she clearly has an issue that Lacey's name has changed, but then she didn't have an issue calling other family members by their nicknames. Ugh, just a disgraceful person. I hope you disown her. Right, let's step things up a bit. Our next story is some phenomenal escalating revenge. Should have just let me walk away with my share. All you had to do was let me walk away. For some background, I am a practicing internal medicine physician and formerly a 50% owner in what was once a fairly successful med spa with 4 locations. At least until what happened below. Before anyone accuses me of breaking the law, blah blah blah, don't. This has been litigated, resolved, and I won. But it is a fun story. In the beginning, my business partner and I were mere acquaintances working with a large hospitalist practice. Looking for extra income to pay off student loans, we decided to band together and open a med spa offering Botox, minor cosmetic procedures, B12 infusions, etc. And it was a huge hit, big enough for us to go full time and expand. This lasted around 7 years. Beginnings of problems. My partner decides that his wife isn't enough for him and begins to step out on her. Now, this is none of my business. However, it does become my business when you embezzle money to pay for your sugar baby's gifts from our business account. Fast forward a few years, and I've sat on this information because business overall was too good to walk away from. However, COVID changed things and we had to close 2 of our 4 locations. My partner has never been great with money or time management, which is why for the most part I handled all of the back office stuff, from ordering supplies to billing and payroll and so on. This comes into play later. Around 6 months ago, I began looking for a new position and found a new job. I didn't want to leave my partner in a hard spot, so I gave him a 90-day notice to find another partner or otherwise get his business affairs in order before I resigned. He instead used this time to siphon off more funds for his side piece and allow his unruly children to ransack my office while I was away on a family vacation, and frequently not showing up to work or showing up late or super hungover, leaving me to do extra. So it was my time to go and my time to get even. Finally, the time had come to wind down my time. Per our agreement, my partner was to buy out my 50% of the practice, which we agreed would occur on the Monday of my last week. Basically, I'd take 50% of our liquid assets as a bank transfer. Monday, upon checking the bank account, I'd been locked out, and upon regaining access, I found that $30,000 of my half had been moved to an account I did not have access to. I had it, and I spent the next few days plotting my revenge. Remember those back office things that I handled above? Well, all of those documents, processes, order forms, etc., they're all shared on our shared office hard drive and are absolutely vital to the practice, and are way too much work for my partner to do himself in a short time. I just so happened to buy an identical model and take the original hard drive home with me. Upon plugging the hard drive in, I found a backup of his calendar, pictures and emails between him and his mistress, which I forwarded to his wife. The following day, I ran a full-page ad in the local paper announcing a special holiday deal on our services, which we'd planned. Lastly, I hired some college students to write a slew of bad reviews on Google and Yelp to tank the overall ratings. The aftermath. The week after my departure, the clinic was insanely busy and quickly ran out of supplies. Since the order forms, etc. were gone, he had to turn away new and long-standing clients. My partner sued for the documents, and I countersued for the $30,000 he owed me. We settled by exchanging the two. I've since heard that his wife divorced him, his mistress left him, and subsequently he has filed for bankruptcy as the clinic never recovered and his wife cleaned him out. I, on the other hand, really like my new job. Well, this is an absolute masterpiece, and yeah, he deserves it. He absolutely deserves the destruction that you've put upon him, and the fact that probably his life is pretty ruined right now. It's just weird because your lives were going so well. Your relationship was so good, right, as business partners, and you were growing this great business. Even through COVID, managing to keep half of your sites open as a new business is extremely impressive. I mean, most businesses definitely would have just completely gone under there, but you managed to keep 2 out of 4 locations open. But no, apparently that wasn't enough. I've got to embezzle loads of money to pay off my new women that I'm chasing, and then some other stuff as well. You know, even your partner who you've grown this business with, you're willing to just hide money from, take money away from them. Yeah, disgusting. And once again, very, very deserve revenge. Okay then, let's step things up once again. Now it's time for some serious stuff. This is r/prorevenge. Do not scheme people and talk about it in another language. They might understand it. I am a Serbian who moved to America to work for 4 years. I was in a smaller IT company, around 20 people, and I was highly regarded by the owners. There were 2 of them. Sometimes I represented them in meetings, mostly when showcasing the company's services and so on. One day, while on a break, I overheard one of the owners mentioning they had a meeting with a Serbian company and they would like me to accompany them in case there were any communication issues. I agreed. During the meeting, we forgot to mention that I was Serbian. I was introduced as an assistant, so I didn't feel the need to introduce myself. When we presented our services, they started speaking in Stravakai. Apologies if I've pronounced that wrong. A Serbian slang where words are twisted. Probably thinking that if anyone had learned Serbian, they wouldn't be able to understand them. I understood every word. They were attempting to deceive the company, and it was evident we weren't their first or last target. I wrote down a few things they said. translated them, and showed one of the owners the translation. After the meeting, they asked if I was sure, and I confirmed. Due to some procedures, we had to meet one more time, but with permission, I said, "Raz milisemo o vasem predlogu," which, by the way, translates as, "We will think about your proposal." They just froze for a second. Face white and open-mouthed, they looked at each other and tried to stay cool, but you could hear in their voices they knew they screwed up. We didn't sign anything with that company. I don't know how many times over the course of my channel's history I've seen stories similar to this. I don't know what it is with idiotic people that just don't think that other people could potentially speak their language. Like, surely the fact that you are speaking your language in the country you're in tells you that there could be other people in the country you're in also speaking the same language. I mean, why even risk this? Why try and talk behind people's backs who you're trying to get money off or, do business with in a situation like this? If you're going to try and scheme someone, and probably don't do it, but if you're going to try, probably don't speak about scheming them to their face. Just insane. Ultimately, they've lost a lot of money. And yes, what they were doing was terrible anyway, but they could have at least made some money from it. So for them personally, their idiotic screw up just cost them tens of thousands of dollars probably. What I do hope is that you got a big pay rise or at least a promotion, because you've saved the company. Now, we don't know how much money it was, but you've saved the company probably a heck of a lot of money just from this one thing and being in that meeting. And also sticking your neck out and telling your bosses, look, I know this is weird, but this is literally what's happening right now. I'm 100% confident on it. How much money might you have saved them? I mean, we have no idea. But yeah, I hope you got a bonus at least. Okay, now that is going to do it for the, let's be honest, sort of safe, gentle stuff of this episode. The next story is crazy. It comes from NuclearRevenge. As you can see by the title and the thumbnail, it is just mental. And yeah, I hope you're prepared for it. If you're not, then just be prepared. Now, before we get into it, I do just want to mention something. It's a bit of an announcement, actually. A lot of you have been commenting, and you've seen over the past couple of weeks or so on my channel that I've been posting pretty much only stories that are based on relationship drama, stories from r/relationship advice, r/relationship subreddits like that. And the reason for that is because I've just been loving those sort of posts and stories at the moment. They come from, best of Redditor updates, that sort of stuff. So there's always conclusions. There's always a lot of drama, which I like, and you guys seem to be liking as well. And that is the reason why I'm covering a lot of them. Now, as you can see in this episode, we're back on a more normal standard subreddit for my channel, prorevenge and revenge subreddits. But I am really enjoying the relationship stuff at the moment. So for that reason, I don't want to completely inundate you all with solely relationship drama content. So what I've done to appease myself and those of you that really like the drama stuff is I've made a new channel, Redditor Extra, where I'm going to be posting solely relationship drama stories, be that weddings, bridezillas, cheating, anything. I mean, you guys have seen over the past couple of weeks, these stories can have literally anything in them over on that channel. Now, I've already posted one entire video episode on that channel, and the reason why nobody has seen it yet, and I've not told anyone yet, is because I wanted to wait until, quite a long time into a normal episode of mine to tell you guys still listening and watching right now, the core audience about the channel. It's a bit of a secret, okay? So I only want the people that are really fans of my stuff to go over there and enjoy the channel. Don't tell people about it. Keep it to yourself. I'll leave a link to it, not even in the description. It's just gonna, I'll leave it in the description, but a few lines down. And I'll also put it on the end screen as well. But yeah, don't go talking about it loads in the comments. I just want this to be for the core fans. All right. With that being said, hopefully people haven't heard that. But yeah, search for Redditor Extra or click the link at the end of this one. Now, let's get in to the fourth and final story of this episode. Make up rumors that I have CP and I'm a prostitute because I won't date you. Say goodbye to your new $150,000 car, and hello prison and a ruined life. So first of all, let's introduce the characters. Me, an 18-year-old male, unmedicated senior. Psycho incel, referred to as PI, a 16-year-old boy. So for backstory, I was the only gay kid in what felt like my entire small, deep southern town, and came out very young, so that identity kind of stuck. My family was mostly very supportive, and I'm grateful for that, because outside of 2 or 3 friends, I might as well have had a scarlet A branded to my forehead. Eventually though, a few other people came out. one being Psycho Incel, a very wealthy, spoiled, all-American entitled kid who drove a very, very expensive new car. Now, when he first came out, it was to no one's surprise, but regardless, a mutual friend was worried it would be a hard time and asked if I would befriend him and give him tips on how to get through it, etc. I, of course, said yes. Big mistake. Now, by this time, I didn't care what anyone thought because the people who mattered had already made it apparent and vice versa. So I was pretty open about the fact that I was actively dating someone much, much older than me. I don't want to hear it, that's not the point of the story. It was a wonderful, healthy relationship that my conservative, traditional dad even supported, so shut up. Fair enough, no comments from me, not that I would comment anyway, respect. Now, after getting coffee with Psycho Incel and being friendly, he apparently developed feelings for me, and after he confessed, I gently told him I was seeing someone and that I was very happy. This was common knowledge in our gossip-ridden high school anyhow, and that was apparently not acceptable to him, and he went ballistic. In small towns, there are often what's known as junior-senior wars, where the two grades have a war of harmless, albeit annoying pranks. However, our school was not completely uncivilized, so there was a group chat for both grades to discuss rules, limits, such as no damaging, no hitting houses if someone expressed that they weren't participating, renting, etc. Well, in that group chat with over 1,000 kids, Psycho Incel thought it would be a great time to drop bombshell number 1. I had expressed that I was not participating, to not hit my house as it's rented, and so on and so forth. Cue Psycho Incel responding directly and saying, "What? You can't afford to buy it with all the money you've been making being a prostitute for your 50-year-old boyfriend?" I would like to say first off, my boyfriend was nowhere near that age. I saw red. I loved that man to death and felt a forehead vein practically hemorrhage. Safe to say, the rumor passed through the high school and the community. My coaches took me aside, our extra religious teachers tormented me more, and I was a pariah. Oh well, I had acceptance to a top university, my friends, my boyfriend, and my family. I was almost done. Then the next rumor dropped, and this is when I went nuclear. One day I got a call from my friend, and immediately I knew something was wrong. Apparently, little Psycho Incel had decided it was a good idea to lie and tell people that I had 1. Cheated on my boyfriend, 2. Made a video with the guy I cheated with, 3. It was with a junior, someone under 18, none of which was remotely true. Thankfully, he was very popular and very straight and was also an obsession of Psycho Incels and knew where it came from. And he agreed to, in writing, expressed that none of this was true and gave me copious amounts of evidence, screenshots of texts, Instagram DMs, etc. of Psycho Incel's online harassment. I kept all of this in a file just in case this ever got out and I needed to defend myself. And thankfully, it never became more than a funny, impossible, salacious story made up about me. However, it was too late for him, as I was already very mentally unstable, and this would have ruined everything I was riding on. Now, on to the revenge, finally. So not only was Psycho Incel's car brand new, but it was a new car because he destroyed his old one and was not getting another. Love small town gossip, but also driving through someone's house is pretty conspicuous, lol. Now, I'll admit I did not come up with this. I read it in a fanfiction, but it actually worked out very well. The first thing I did was go to the furthest bait and tackle shop I could find, and I bought catfish bait. Now, if you don't fish, you might not know, but catfish love the stinkiest, smelliest bait you can find, and I bought a whole jar of the slop. I knew the parking lot of my school had no security or cameras because my car had already been vandalized. I did embrace the F word carved into my door with pride eventually. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And then I got to work in the cold February morning. The first thing I did was hammer nails into 3 of his tires. Now, this wouldn't pop them immediately, but they would eventually each deflate at much more inconvenient places, and nails would look more accidental than if they were slashed. Then I took poison ivy and rubbed it all over the door handles of his car. Afterwards, I took a mix of gravel and Vaseline and spread it all over the windshield wipers, which would just scratch the heck out of it once he used them. My favourite, however, was using that catfish bait. Knowing enough about cars, i.e. copious Googling, I figured out how to get to the AC portion, and I poured in the catfish bait. Sadly, I wouldn't be able to witness this, but he wouldn't be using his AC for another month or so since it's still cold. all that time for it to rot, fester, congeal, and the first day it's warm and he decides to blast AC, his car will be filled with the fumes of 1,000 rotten piles of roadkill and low tide without any idea where it's coming from or how to get rid of it. The next part of this story is honestly out of pure dumb luck, and I can't claim complete responsibility from the universe's work. However, I, being the obsessive paranoid type, would check his socials from a burner account now and again, perhaps hoping to hear about his fishy car or to see if he aired out more rumors about me. One day, I found something odd. Nothing. Every single social media was gone. Out of pure curiosity, I googled his name and found something very juicy and very crazy. He was arrested in an entirely different state for attempting to impersonate a government official and bring a gun into a theme park. Safe to say that didn't fly, but also it did not get enough traction as I would like. Thus, I sent it to everyone I knew in our small town. His summer job, future college, our high school, that giant group chat of over 1,000 people. Yeah, it got sent there as well. By the end of the day, he was a pariah, jobless, and collegeless. I left my town, and honestly, I haven't heard anything about him since. But I can't imagine he amounted to much, being that insane, and with that type of crime as well. Well, there we go. Safe to say things definitely ramped up in this episode, my word. I mean, to be honest, the first 3 stories were pretty chill. That last one, wow. Goodness me. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than accusing someone of having or creating CP. I mean, that is just revolting. And to be honest, I think you should go to prison for that. I mean, you have to be arrested for that. That is such a bold, huge claim that can absolutely destroy someone's life, even if it's not true. That I think the ramifications have to be serious for the person making that claim if it is completely false, and they know it's completely false, and they're just doing it to, I don't know, destroy your image. To be honest though, despite all you did, which was great, it seemed that in the end, he was the one that actually pressed his own self-destruct button, right? I mean, where did that come from? The fact that he impersonated a police officer and walked into a theme park with a gun. What the heck? I mean, I did not see that coming. Just shows that this guy was absolutely insane. I think that the incel is a pretty good word to describe him, let's be realistic, although it's probably more than that. I don't really know what he was planning to do with that gun though. That is the scary thing. And based on the other stuff that we've seen him do throughout this story, I don't know. I'm only just kind of thankful that he was caught before anything serious happened. Aunt broke my model kit, so I took away her everything. This whole thing started exactly a year ago, but just ended. And a friend told me to post here, so off we go. I live in Turkey, and as you know, the southeast of my country was wrecked by a couple of giant earthquakes a year ago. My city was the epicenter, and while the house I lived in with my family wasn't destroyed, a lot of shelves got knocked off, and one of them was the one where I held my gunpla kits. Now, I'm not entirely sure, guys, what that is, but I think it's some sort of anime thing, figurine. Now, I don't want to, get that wrong, so in the comments, let me know, but yeah. Some sort of figurine, toys, whatever. Out of all the kits I had, only one survived, an MG-the-O that was heavily customized. I built it with my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, so I was ecstatic it survived. Now, a few months after everything had calmed down, my mother called her relatives for dinner, which included Aunt B. Now, not B for female dog, her name does actually start with the letter B. She came alongside her son, who is 8, and is an entitled brat. While the adults were drinking coffee, this little brat barged in my room and demanded to play with my computer. Now I refused since I was editing a video for my college society and had the camera on. Well, the brat went back crying to his mother, who came and started yelling at me. While I was dealing with her, her little brat climbed on my desk, took my model kit, and then immediately dropped it and stepped on it. The rest is just yelling, me swearing up and down, telling them they were going to pay for it, with her calling me a weirdo for still having toys and that she wasn't going to pay for trash. My mother at first thought about not making her pay to keep the peace, but when she realized it was a kit that I made with my late grandfather, her father, she was angrier than I was and went out for blood. We took the case to a friend of hers who is a lawyer that specializes within family cases, and they told us since my camera caught it all, we would definitely win, but it was better to just come to an agreement out of court in a settlement since it would be cheaper. I pulled out a price list of the kits I needed to make an exact replica of the one that was destroyed, and it came to just about $1,000, which came to about 25 to 27,000 Turkish lira with the exchange rate. Well, She refused, so we took her to court. She pulled all kinds of BS to not pay and delay, but the judge ended up making her pay $1,650 plus an order for her to pay any border taxes on the replacement kits alongside the court and lawyer fees. It completely effed her savings, and her husband, who was already waiting for a chance to divorce her, took it. When it all ended up, she had nothing and even lost her brat's custody to her ex-husband, and not only lost the down payment she had for a house, but all her savings, and she didn't get alimony from her husband. Now, am I happy that her life got completely effed? No, not really. Do I feel sorry it happened? Not in the slightest. She and her crotch goblin effed around and found out it's that simple. I feel bad for her husband though. He's going to be the one trying to make that brat into a normal person, and I don't envy him in the slightest. Wow, that is definitely nuclear. From something so kind of seemingly not that bad at all. I mean, it happens. Kids destroy things. They can be horrible. We all know this. You do have to, though, understand the fact that, it's very sad, the thing that has been destroyed, and it's also very expensive as well. Surely you just pay the money back. But no, she chose not to, and yeah, as OP said in the title, he took away her everything. Crazy. It's kind of mad how not paying damages after your kid did one thing led to her losing her house, custody, a divorce, my goodness me, all her money. Oh, crazy. And having to pay back more in the end anyway. There we go, the definition of sweet nuclear revenge. Now let's get into the story from the title and thumbnail. Neighbor ruined my garden. I turned his yard into a swamp. Get ready for a wild ride, folks. This is the story of how my battle with a neighbor over my beloved garden led me to transform his pristine yard into a swamp, and in the process, I became a local legend. It all started when I moved into a new house, which came with a small but charming garden. Gardening quickly became my passion, and I spent months turning that space into a blooming paradise full of flowers and a few veggies. My neighbors seemed to appreciate the view, all except one. Let's call him Grumpy Greg. Grumpy Greg was the kind of guy who took too much pride in his perfectly manicured lawn, the type that looks more like a golf course than a yard. He despised my garden, calling it untidy and an eyesore that attracted pests. I tried to reason with him, offered to keep it more contained, even suggested setting up a small fence. But no, Greg wanted it gone. One morning, I woke up to find most of my garden destroyed. Flowers uprooted, veggies trampled, and my small bird bath smashed. I knew it was Greg. No proof, but who else would it be? I was furious, heartbroken, but then inspiration struck. I remembered Greg's one true love, his flawless lawn. I did some research and found the perfect, most diabolical yet completely legal revenge. I bought hundreds of water retention crystals, the kind meant to help soil retain moisture for plants, except I wasn't planning on using them for their intended purpose. Under the cover of night, I went to work, spreading these crystals all over Greg's precious lawn. These tiny crystals are harmless, but when they come into contact with water, they expand, holding many times their weight in water. And wouldn't you know, the forecast predicted a week of heavy rain starting the next day. The rain came and the crystals did their job too well. Greg's perfect lawn transformed into a squishy, waterlogged mess. Every step taken on the grass felt like stepping on a waterbed. The lawnmower got stuck and the yard had become the neighborhood's newest swamp. Greg was livid, blaming everyone and everything for his misfortune, but he couldn't prove a thing. It took weeks for the effects to wear off, and by then, his lawn never truly recovered. In the meantime, I rebuilt my garden, even better than before. Neighbors who learned about the ordeal and Greg's role in destroying my garden came to help, bringing plants, seeds, and even a new bird bath. My garden became a symbol of the community, a place where neighbors would stop by to chat and admire the flowers. As for Greg, he became a lot less grumpy, especially after I casually mentioned how unpredictable gardening can be, and how it's important to have a good relationship with your neighbors. He got the message loud and clear. So that's the tale of how I turned a bully's yard into a swamp, and in the process, united our little community. Sometimes a bit of creative thinking and a whole lot of water retention crystals is all it takes to stand up to a bully and come out on top. All right, there we go. Now, the cynic in me is saying, and guys, I want to hear your thoughts on this, that this might not be real. I'm going to be honest. It's written almost like a movie script, and I'm not entirely sure. Now, I did know this before recording and narrating this, but I wanted to hear your thoughts. more generally, because as I always say with stories like this, there is no way of actually knowing for real if this has happened. I mean, even if I, contacted the person who wrote it and asked them for an interview, they could still lie to me. So we've got no way of knowing if this happened for real. So I can only judge it based on what we've got here. What do you think down below? Some things for me don't add up. Would you really wake up and your whole garden's been destroyed and you didn't wake up at some point during the night? I'm not sure. Can water crystals really cause that much of a mess and that much damage? I'm again not sure. Comment down below, what do you think? I mean, superficially, or at least on the surface, it's a great story of nuclear revenge, but I'm just not sure I believe it. Okay, now moving on to our next story, this one from r/prorevenge. Landlord screwed with the wrong tenant for too long. The minor details here might not be entirely accurate, as I've no interest in a revival of this conflict on any level. I won completely, and any resurrection can only taint the experience. We'll start off by noting that I spent about 2 decades working in security. During that time, I worked many different types of security in many different locations. The one that matters for this story was time spent in the rental housing tribunal in a major city as a kind of bailiff. For those not knowing what that is, think of a courtroom in a major city anyway. In a smaller town, it will probably be an event room in a hotel or community centre, as you'd see on TV, but with less formality and an adjudicator instead of a judge. They functionally are the same thing to landlords and tenants, but they definitely aren't the same thing. This place exclusively deals with landlord and tenant disputes and is the only place to resolve said disputes. Note that I wasn't a bailiff and it wasn't a court, but these terms most accurately describe the situation and my place in it. Okay, so OP had experience here. For 2 years, I worked at the rental housing tribunal. It was early in my time in security. I was 18 to 20-ish. Being as it was a major city, the sheer number of cases I sat through was beyond my ability to count. I saw everything there was to see. No one is capable of surprising me with a story because I've seen them all. In detail, as a side duty of mine was to ensure that all parties had copies of all evidence being presented, I did a lot of photocopying and always read and inspected everything I copied to ensure that nothing got cut off or made illegible. By the time I stopped working there, I probably knew the way everything worked well enough to be an adjudicator myself. Well, no, obviously not, but I'm certainly in no need of a lawyer either should I ever have the need to go there. I also had intimate knowledge of how the system worked beyond the actual rules. Like, for example, adjudicators would always give a little leeway to anyone representing themselves over someone who had a lawyer, or how annoyed adjudicators would get when a party was speaking out of turn. Seriously, do not do that. Okay, so skip forward almost a decade now. I left the city and I'm in a fairly large town in the same province, with the same tenant laws. I have a few roommates in a decently sized townhouse. We get along well, but there's a problem. Only I can write checks and our paydays don't line up. So I'm the one who pays the rent and I usually can't do it on the first because my roommates don't usually all pay in time. We advise the landlord we might be a day or two late, but we'll always have it by the 3rd at the latest. They have no problem with it at all. I spoke to them myself. For about a year, this works fine. No complaints from the landlord because even if we're often a day or two late, we always pay. We're also fairly quiet and don't damage the property. Nearly model tenants. I do not actually have any idea why, but one day this changed. I suspect a different person in the company started overseeing the region. One day, suddenly, we got a summons to the Rental Housing Tribunal, hereafter to be referred to as RHT, on the 2nd of the month for failure to pay rents. This doesn't actually lead to a case because we paid the same day, but now we have to pay the application fee the landlord paid in order to serve the summons. I complained to the neighbour, who was also the superintendent, and eventually heard back that their contact at the company was now demanding 1st of the month, no exceptions. Well, that really didn't work for us, so we probably had to pay that fee 15 to 20 times over the next 2 years. I could have gone to the tribunal over it, but we were technically without a leg to stand on, and I knew it. Maybe if I went enough times, I could ding them for harassment, but I didn't have time for that, and my roommates don't care. After being split between us all, the fee wasn't enough of a deterrent to change our behaviour, so we accepted it. Now, if this was the only issue, there wouldn't be much story though. At around the same time the rent leeway vanished, so did mandatory maintenance. I'm not going to list everything that went wrong and wasn't fixed. You'll get a decent idea at the end. We suffered through it. We were all working too many hours at terrible pay to be able to actually do anything about it. We adapted. But after about 2 years, it broke. Everyone but me up and moved out for various reasons within a 4-month period. I'm not going to go into any details on my roommates at all because things kind of exploded for a couple of different reasons outside of this. No reason to dig any of that up. I'd been saving up for a while and was able to quit my job without having to immediately get another, so I suddenly had a lot of time. I didn't want to stay and pay the rent by myself or have to find new roommates I could live with, and with my experience in the RHT, I knew I had the landlord by the balls. So I went for them. I stopped paying rent. Annoyingly, I didn't get a summons the first month, but I did the second, so I went. With a meticulously documented plethora of evidence of failure to maintain the property and entering the property without formal notice, I had a copy of the landlord and a copy for the adjudicator. I know from experience that technically you're supposed to give the other party the evidence before the tribunal, but I also knew about that leeway an adjudicator gives to those who represent themselves. So I didn't give the landlord the evidence until our case came up. 100% total ambush. Now they argued that they were ambushed, but the adjudicator just dismissed the case, dressed me down a little, and told me to file my own summons as I should have done. This was the petty revenge. The landlord and lawyer drove 3 hours to get there for nothing. Worse than nothing. I filed my own summons and the big day shows up. It's been about 4 months of me not paying rent at this point. I'm prepared to if I lose, but I don't think I'm going to. The whole thing could not have gone better. I had 20 to 30 pages of evidence and 20 odd photographs. They had nothing. They had no actual defense for our water heater being out for 6 months or us not having a fridge for a year, just to mention 2 severe issues. Their entire defense rested on us being late for rent, which actually worked against them once that led to the adjudicator learning how many times we'd paid the application fee and lies that had no evidence to support them. They even talked over me a few times, and I saw in the adjudicator's eyes the one time I opened my mouth to protest during their turn to speak, but I forced myself to shut up with every gram of willpower I had, so only a squeak came out, and the adjudicator respected me for that. But he had no respect for the landlord. I'd won on every possible front. The only question was how much. It was more than I'd ever seen. I got 9 months of free rent, and the landlord was ordered to have everything fixed before the next month was over, or I'd get more. I gave notice that I was leaving at the end of the 8th month, and I left at the end of the 9th. Because the landlord had never renewed the lease, I didn't have to give him the 3-month notice the lease specified. So if you want to put a figure on it, I basically got a $13,000 judgment in my favour, adjusted for inflation and rounded. I also made the landlord and lawyer drive 3 hours, twice, only to lose. The landlord's face was so red at the end, I thought he'd have a heart attack. He didn't though. Bye, Mark. Well, one thing is for sure, there is nothing worse than a bad landlord. I feel like they're just in a position of ultimate power, and a lot of the time you do hear pretty bad stories of landlords just abusing that power and taking advantage of their tenants in so many different ways. And this one I wasn't really expecting, but this sounds awful. I mean, not having a fridge for a year is crazy. I mean, you add on top of that the fact that you didn't have hot water for 6 months. That's genuinely bordering on inhumane. I will say though that not all landlords are bad, and you do, I think, hear about the bad ones more than you hear about the good ones. I recently moved out of a flat with my mates, and the landlords were pretty good, to be fair. They gave us a decent chunk of our deposit back, what I think was fair, and they were nice and helpful throughout our entire tenancy. But I do think that bad landlords that do stuff like this give the rest of landlords a really bad rep. However, it's great to see that you got a very, very hefty judgment against them. Fair play to you. Now for our final story of revenge, metered on ramps. Back when metered on ramps were first installed on the main highway in my town in Oregon, the interval between lights on the ramp I used daily was 15 seconds. Cars would be backed up onto the adjacent feeder streets, and you could be stuck for 15 to 20 minutes on the ramp. It took a bit of research to find out that it wasn't the city or county, but ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, that controlled them. After repeated complaints and no action, I finally got the names of the 2 ODOT traffic engineers responsible for setting the light intervals. I made numerous voicemails and finally had one discussion, but still, no fix to the issue. Well, back in the day, this happened in the early 2000s, we still had phone books, and both these engineers had listed home phone numbers. So I got a 4x8 piece of plywood and painted and lettered it. Are you tired of these idiotic ramp lights? Call the ODOT engineers responsible for them. Dennis M, and then OP has censored his surname, 503, and then censored the rest of the number, and Bill C censored 503, rest of the number censored, and let them know what you think. Oh my goodness me. And I can assure you guys, they were not censored on OP's piece of plywood. I am sure about that. OP said they stood with it on the side of the ramp for 2 days, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. The next day, I get a call from one of them, don't remember which, begging me to stop. I said, fix the frickin' lights. You'll stop with the sign? They replied, fix the frickin' lights. Okay. The very next day, they had a survey crew out there in the afternoon to count cars. And the day after that, the lights were reset to 3 seconds between cars. Bottom line, when dealing with government, until those personally responsible are held accountable in a manner that inconveniences or scares them, they will continue to abuse the public, whether from negligence, incompetence, or malice, but bring it home to them and they will, grudgingly, change their ways. So this is pretty much doxing before the internet was a thing, right? I mean, before doxing as we know it now was a thing, this is the physical version of doing it. Imagine actually having to do this, going outside, marking someone's name, phone number on a piece of plywood and just showing each and every individual car to actually get something done. It's crazy that OP had to go to this length, but yeah, I guess they did, and I guess it worked. I do think your last point is good. Until someone is actually dealing with the consequences of their stupid actions, I mean, who knows why it was set at 15 seconds when it could have been at 3? It's ridiculous. They're not going to change it, sadly. And I imagine that you weren't the first person to complain, by the way, OP. I'm sure lots of people who do that route a lot of times, we're also doing the same thing. But yeah, until you actually went out of your way and did something about it to affect them personally, nothing changed. So again, fair play to you. Threaten my friend with revenge prawn, I'll ruin your whole dang life. My very good friend made some slightly dumb mistakes and sent some pictures to someone that she reasonably thought she could trust, but not knowing much more than his first name, his screen name, and roughly where he lived and the type of work he did. He is not in our country, but had indicated that he would be traveling for work to near us shortly, and they'd made some plans to meet. And when she got some red flags and backed out, the dude threatened to publish these pictures online. I am, incidentally, an attorney. So, some searching later and gathering up any pictures he sent her of him that could possibly identify him, his online handle led me to a TikTok page, which led me to an Instagram page with his name on it. That led to a LinkedIn page with his place of work that matched a picture he sent with a branded polo he was wearing. Some more searches got me the email of the CEO, the VP of HR, operations manager, and the public relations manager. I just fired off an email on behalf of my client of the screenshots of him threatening revenge prawn, snippets of the conversation showing that username while he sent that exact picture of him wearing his company's branded apparel, links to how I know it's him, along with pictures he sent her of his motorcycle with the license plate showing, as further proof that it is him. I also included screenshots of him discussing a workplace incident that were timestamped, along with pieces of dialogue discussing how he had sex with an ex at his place of work, and discussing plans to have sex with her in his office as well. I also included a picture he sent her showing his work laptop with his entire Outlook calendar, along with proprietary information, which he sent to prove he was busy, along with other pictures he took of his workplace with non-consenting employees. I further informed his employer that I will be forwarding all this information to law enforcement, and since he'd indicated that he'd be traveling to the US soon, will also forward this to the local office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, as, since my client is a US citizen on US soil, these threats constituted a federal crime, so that should they continue with his employment and continue with their plans to send him to the United States for work, I will ensure, on behalf of my client, that federal law enforcement is waiting for him on arrival, which I will do as one of the assistant US attorneys for this region is a law school buddy of mine. Since I have his license plate, I know where he lives and will be contacting his local authorities tomorrow. You dumb mother effer, thinking you were hiding around anonymity, thinking you could threaten my friend? It took me 45 minutes to destroy your life. Okay, so I'm recording this on the 5th of April, 2024. What I've just read there was posted on the 4th of April in the morning, and there is an update to come, phenomenally, which was posted literally just a few hours ago at the time of recording this. Now, before we get into that, I just want to give my initial thoughts. Yeah, I mean, what else can you say really other than, you know, F around and find out? If you're going to try something like this and you're not clever and you're leaving clues and hints as to who you really are, in the modern day with technology, it's really not that hard to do a little bit of digging. I mean, yes, you've got unlucky, I guess unlucky in air quotes here, that that the person that you're doing this to has a friend who's a good lawyer. But I mean, anyone could do this. It's not that hard. If you're leaving clues like this, it's so easy to find who you are, where you live, who you work for, etc., etc. And you've just ruined your entire life. What for? For threatening something stupid like this? Really? Was it worth it? Obviously not. I mean, you deserve it. Absolutely, but you're just so dumb. Then again, he's probably not expecting this sort of level. I would love to see his face as he realizes this unravels. I mean, we're going to get into the update right now to see what happens next, but my word, imagine this. You send off a threat online, think nothing of it, think, oh, I'm so clever and anonymous here and I'm going to get what I want. And then the following happens. Let's get into the update. Okay, now let's get into the update of that one, posted just 22 hours ago at the time of recording. Like I said in the intro, this is a very fresh story. So, barely 12 hours later, this happened. Before I get into the update though, I want to clarify a few things from my original post, primarily about the contact of the employer and why. Some questioned its truthfulness. While the entire story is true, some details were omitted for various reasons. There was more she and I had in our possession that did positively identify this individual. So, would a lawyer contact his employer, like some stated would not be done? Well, it depends. I did not do what I did on behalf of a client who retained me. I did it as a friend to help a friend. And as her friend, who was also a labour and employment law attorney, I knew exactly how to squeeze this. And here is the thing. I was absolutely aware from the onset that the revenge prom threat would go nowhere with his employer, even if I could clearly lay out how the person with this screen name was in fact this person who works at that company. All we had were screenshots. If it was just the revenge prom threat, any employer would go, well, thank you for bringing it to our attention, but even if we accept our employee uses this screen name and we neither confirm nor deny anyone of that name works here, we have no provenance on this. This is just an alleged screenshot of an alleged conversation that could be easily edited and manipulated. Please feel free to pursue this with local authorities, and rest assured, should we be asked to, we will cooperate fully with any law enforcement inquiry, but we have no further comment at this time. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. These days, it's so easy to edit absolutely anything, and I guess that's why a company couldn't really use it. And I know that's what they would say, because that's exactly what I would say. An alleged screenshot of an alleged conversation that was allegedly sent under an alleged username that's allegedly one of our employees. Whatever, dude. Call the cops if you're worried about it. We'll answer them honestly if they come to us. So no, the issue wasn't the revenge prom threat. It was the picture of the contents of the work laptop, because that can't be faked. There's no way of her or me to create a false image of the actual proprietary information on his work computer unless he sent it. There is no way for me or her to have possession of images taken of his co-workers without their consent unless he sent them. The proof here wasn't that this person broke the law, it's that he sent pictures of company employees and property which would absolutely be verifiable by their IT department that yes, this absolutely is his laptop. That's what would get him fired. So I advised my friend not to block him, to sit back and wait and not respond to anything, but let him dig himself deeper. And respond he did. Oh, and one more update, he's been fired. So with now definitive proof that the individual in the online conversation is in fact this person, we'll forward it all to the local authorities in his country, along with his license plate number. They are more than capable of getting his home address. Well, OP, fair play to you. It's one thing me saying at the end of the first post, you know, it's easy to do this now, to track people down online. It's another thing doing it legally and making sure you know exactly what you're doing and then carrying out what you want to happen so well to, as you say, yeah, completely destroy this guy's life very fairly and very justly in just what, 45 minutes. I don't really get why people need an extra explanation. I think you explained it perfectly at the start, OP. There are a few weird comments down below. Apparently people were confused. I wasn't confused. I think you explained it perfectly well. And yeah, it was just really well executed from start to finish. Definitely the most professional nuclear revenge that I've seen. Normally we get some crazy stuff that is either bordering on illegal or is just very illegal. This was nuclear because it absolutely destroyed someone's life, but it was so professionally and expertly done, it doesn't even feel nuclear. It just feels right. Okay, now let's move on to our next story of nuclear revenge. How about this for a title? Didn't really want to post on this account, but it's the only one that met the karma requirements. Not too much given away there. Let's go. Okay, bear with me. I'm dyslexic and struggle with writing. Me and my girlfriend moved up to a remote little town a year ago. It's so peaceful and amazing, best decision of our lives. We were looking at places to buy and we came across a house that was pretty bad. The foundation was collapsing, the roof was collapsing, there was a rodent problem, but it was on 10 acres or something close to that, a beautiful plot of land. My girlfriend falls in love with this place. It's $215,000. Yeah, not gonna go for something that's that bad. I work construction and I don't want to come home to then work again. Now, my girlfriend's friend, let's call her Patricia. Sounds like a female dog name. I never bothered trying to remember her real one. Offered to buy the place and then sell it to us later. Yeah, no. She said we'll talk about it, but I stand on a hard no, and then my girlfriend tells Patricia no. Patricia and her boyfriend, Mitch, that's his actual name. I don't care if he sees this. In fact, I hope they do. Wow, that is a rarity for someone on Reddit to say, no, that is his actual name. No fake names here, and I hope you see this. Already bought the house, thinking we'd buy it from them for more than the 215k. But okay, cool. My girlfriend has her friend moving out here that she's known since she was 3. I told them that if they buy the materials and the tools, and I keep the tools when they're done, I'll do the work for them for no additional cost, because I lost all my tools when we moved. Now, this Mitch guy trashes all over me about how he works in finance and doesn't need any help. Okay, whatever. I tell him what he needs to work on first because there are major issues, but I get pooped on again. Okay, let's talk about my girlfriend now. So she has PTSD, BPD, and a couple of other things that I don't remember off the top of my head. She struggles to make friends, so this is a big deal for her. She is super excited. So when they get here, they don't visit her. They don't give any idea that they talk every day and every night, but then they get here and they block her on everything. It absolutely destroys her because she doesn't understand what she did wrong. Now, they were upset and were cussing her out because she apparently tricked them into buying the place. She didn't. I told them not to because I was never going to say yes. Now, fast forward a year or so. They're on Facebook complaining about all the issues that I pointed out were issues they'd need to fix. So this actual crackhead Mitch is cussing us out. Now, I am just tired of this at this point. So I call the city and pretty much rat them out. I say they have plumbing issues, electrical issues, the roof and the floor is caving in, support issues, rodent problem, all of which can get it condemned. So guess what happened? I made a complaint and got it condemned. Then I went to his place of work and filed a report with corporate about his drug issues because he's a financial advisor at a bank and I don't think he should be anywhere near anyone else's money. I hope they enjoy $215,000 worth of debt with no job and nowhere to stay because I'm done getting cussed out and having them drag my girlfriend's name through the mud because they thought they could jack up the price and sell it to us. Damn, what great friends they must be, trying to buy a house for you, but in reality, just charge you more than the original price of the house. Terrible people. What I hope is that when the bank gets hold of this house, repossesses it, that they kind of, I don't know, look to resell it to somebody like you for less than the original price. I think what you then probably have to do is just knock it all down and start again. It sounds like there are so many issues here that aren't even worth bothering with. So maybe you'd have to do that, and it probably would be a lot of work. If you can make it work and the price is not too expensive, it does sound like it's a beautiful property, and I feel like you've gone through enough now to warrant that level of extra effort if you can be bothered. But yeah, as for the story, just from what I've read, all I can say is that they're just terrible people. Imagine that, saying, oh, I can't wait to move to your town. It's going to be so fun. We're talking every night, like so excited to come down, spend loads of time together. And also, like, I'm doing you such a favor by buying this house for you. We'll be in it for a short time. Then look, we'll sell it to you for a cheaper price. Just we'll make sure it's ready for you and no one else gets it. Then just blocking them and saying, oh, actually, you can't have the house. And also, why did you force us to buy it? Great friends right there. Not going to pay me overtime? Think again. I was discussing this sub with a good friend, and he said, boy, have I got a story that will fit. Now, it wasn't his story, but his brother's, and I sat with him and got the details. Buckle up, it's a good one and a long one. Let's call him Bob. Bob has been fiddling with computers since he was a kid, and knows them pretty well. As with most IT people, he's moved from job to job. The employee he worked for was a service/distribution company, and there were 2 IT employees. The company was located in Ontario, Canada. About 3 years ago, Bob's employer decided to modernize their software. They had separate programs for dispatching, for inventory, for payroll and finances, and it was complicated moving information from one program to the other. They decided to get an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning program, and Bob recommended one that he knew inside out from a previous employer. For those of you who don't know, an ERP program handles everything. Purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers, all of it. You can run a report and find out which customer has bought the most part ABC in the last year. which salesman has improved his numbers the most, which vendor has the fastest delivery time, which shipper packed the most orders. Everyone in the company used the ERP program, but it was very complicated, and they used the aspects of it that related to their position. For example, the receiver would accept a shipment, verify the quantity, confirm it was received, and the inventory stats would be available to the salespeople if they wanted to look up how many were on hand. The receiver didn't care what the price was or who the vendor was, he just did his job. Now, Bob was run ragged during the implementation process, but he managed to train most of the employees on their aspects, and after a few months, everything was running fairly smoothly. Bob still got tickets for tweaks in the operation of the software and occasional hardware IT issues. Then the company decided to expand their footprint and was marketing into different time zones. That messed things up. Atlantic Canada is 90 minutes early, so if someone sent an email or an order at 8 AM their time, it would arrive at 6:30 AM Ontario time. Pacific Canada is 3 hours late, so an email sent at 3 PM Vancouver time would arrive at 6 PM. This stretched out the day, so many staff came in early and worked late. Bob would arrive at 8 AM, and there'd be people that demanded his immediate assistance and were annoyed that he didn't respond instantly even though their request was submitted before his start time. Same with later in the day. His phone would ring at dinner time with people that wanted help right now. They decided to stagger his and his IT colleague's shift times. Bob would start at 6 AM and work until 2:30, and his colleague would start at 10:30 AM and work till 7. Bob's colleague had kids and refused the shift change. The employer insisted, the colleague quit. That meant that Bob was the only person in the IT department. The employer said they'd looked to hire a new IT guy, but they had trouble finding one that knew the ERP system, and they were offering well under a market value salary. Bob asked for a raise and was denied. Then he wanted overtime, and the employer told him that as an IT specialist, he was exempt from overtime laws in Ontario. Bob looked it up, and the employer was correct. This went on for some time, and he knew lots of IT people socially. They told him what the company was offering, and Bob knew that they wouldn't find another tech. Things went downhill from there. Bob would get chewed out if he missed a call or an email, no matter what time it came in. He had to train new hires in the ERP system, as well as take care of the hardware. He asked repeatedly for better compensation, and was denied, so he planned to get a new job. Now, here is the revenge. Bob had access to the entirety of the ERP program. When a user signed in, the time was logged, and even if they didn't sign out, after 15 minutes it would log them out anyway. Everyone in the company was on salary, and many of them came in early and stayed late. Ontario labour laws states that even salaried workers are entitled to overtime after 44 hours a week, unless they were managers or supervisors. So Bob jumped into the program and ran a report for each employee that wasn't a manager, all the way back to when the ERP program was started. Then he reached out to an employment lawyer and got the okay to refer employees to him. Bob lined up another job, and after he left, every employee in the company got an email with an Excel sheet showing the hours they had put in past 44 hours a week. The subject line said, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay," and in the body of the email was the lawyer's name. The poop hit the fan. Almost every employee authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf, and the company had to pay a ton of money. All the company had to do was pay Bob for the extra work he put in. Instead, they had to pay almost everyone. Okay, great revenge, I'm not gonna lie, but my main takeaway from this, my main emotion, is just feeling bad for just all the employees in general to work for this horrible company. Bob, obviously, on the one hand, having to do not just 2 people's jobs, but more like, it seems like 5 or 6. I mean, those shift times are ridiculous, and he is the only one that knows how this all works. That is such a specialized role that he's not even being paid for properly at all. I mean, it's not even close, it sounds like. And then, all the other employees who were doing overtime, but then haven't been getting paid for it. What if Bob had never done this? They would have just done all those hours and never been given the money for them? It's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, shout out Bob for helping out so many employees that were just being completely manipulated and just not given what they deserved. It's just sad that it had to come to that. Crazy. Pay the man the money he's worth for his skill, and this would never ever have happened. But then again, you could also say just pay the employees what they deserve and are owed for the overtime, and they'll probably be more happy as well, and it would just, contribute to a much better working environment, and the company would probably do way better because of it. I don't know. It's just a weird one. I feel like it's backwards policy from a company like this, just trying to, scrimp and save money, when in reality, you're expanding, you're clearly doing well. Pay your staff more, and they'll pay it back to you in terms of output. And yeah, the company will just do better. I don't know. It's just weird business practice, isn't it, really? But great revenge nonetheless. A mother's instigation, a daughter's completion. I have promised my late friend that I wouldn't share this story until at least a year after her death. That time has passed, and this is nothing short of beautiful. Cruel, but beautiful. I'm going to switch to first person POV. This is the story as my late friend told me. I was an only child to 2 loving parents. Mum had a difficult pregnancy and an even harder labour. It was so bad that the doctor advised that they never try again. Because he didn't want his wife to die, Dad got a vasectomy that was successful. I was sad that I didn't have any siblings, but I had a happy childhood until I was a young adult. When I was in the middle of college, Mum was diagnosed with stage 4 high-grade serous ovarian cancer. It's the most aggressive form of ovarian cancer, and Mum's older sister and Mum both died from it. We knew her odds weren't good. I don't know what Dad was thinking, I really don't, but he started an affair with his co-worker, a woman just a few years older than me. The co-worker started integrating herself into my and Mum's life. She'd go shopping for us, keep the house in order, help with homework, and even sit with Mum when Mum was going through chemo and Dad and I weren't there. And no, I had no clue at all. I just thought it was the co-worker being kind to a family going through hard times. Mum fought. She fought hard, but the odds just weren't in her favour. One day I was visiting her in hospice and we were playing chutes and ladders. Mum got real quiet. And then she told me, "You do know your dad isn't planning to reverse his vasectomy, right?" I was surprised, wondering what she was talking about. "Yeah, I know," I said. "Why?" Mum just looked at me and said, "I think you'd best keep it in mind." We continued playing, and when I left for the night, I kissed her, and she said, "You'll be fine on your own." She died that night. I believe she knew she was going to die that night and didn't want to scare me. Once again, the co-worker was right by our side. She helped us plan the funeral, brought us food, helped out around the house, and slowly started moving her things in. It was like putting a frog in a pot of water and having the temperature raised. It was slow. It was gradual. A year or so later, she had completely moved herself in and was part of our lives. I don't remember what made me suspicious enough to start digging, but start digging I did. I learned the affair began shortly after Mum's diagnosis. I was sickened, furious, and saddened. I took out my cell phone, ready to confront Dad and co-worker with the knowledge, but something else struck me. See, during one of her visits, the co-worker mentioned to Mum and me that she wished to have children with her fiancé. Mum knew that the affair was going on, and she trusted me to spill the beans. But I wanted to twist the knife further. As a result, I decided to play the long game. It was a gamble, one that had a good chance of not paying off, but it was one I was willing to take. I kept my mouth shut. I watched as they courted, got engaged, and married 3 years later. I squealed with delight when they announced their engagement to me. I wore a proud smile on their wedding day, and I made a toast at the reception. I even took extra steps to hide test results from Dad's urologist in such a way that the co-worker couldn't find it, but Dad would. Believe me, I was internally screaming. I wanted the world to know the way they hurt Mum and me during her darkest hour. I got dangerously close several times, but I said nothing, knowing the payoff would be worth it. Time passed. We played happy family. I got married to my awesome husband and had children. My dad and co-worker played doting grandparents, but I knew from the pained look on the co-worker's face that she was bemoaning her empty nest. Just as I was beginning to give up hope, the day came. The co-worker and I had started the tradition of getting together for coffee shortly after Mum's death. We talk girl things, again as I internally screamed. Laugh, cry, love, live, that sort of thing. That day, the co-worker was sad and sullen. I could tell that she'd been crying. I asked what was wrong. I couldn't believe my ears when I heard why. She was struggling to get pregnant for years, but assumed it was stress from work. Then her periods started coming fewer and farther between. She decided to go to the doctor and find out why. It turned out she was entering perimenopause, and her chances of successfully getting pregnant had dwindled. The doctor told her, in essence, that her childbearing years were over. As I crooned sympathetic noises, the co-worker said, "It doesn't make sense. We tried so hard to have kids, but I wasn't able to get pregnant. I don't know why. It was then that I knew it was time. You mean Dad didn't tell you? I said. Didn't tell me what? She asked. I was fighting every chance to smile as I tried playing the "it's not my right to tell" and "I can't believe he didn't tell you" cards until she practically begged me. I should have won an Oscar for my performance. I told her about the vasectomy and that Dad had no intention of reversing it. You should have seen her. She completely deflated like a balloon. Her shoulders slumped, she bowed her head, and she sobbed in her hands. I wanted to rejoice. I wanted to rub her face in it. I knew though that would make me look like the bad guy. So I hugged her and rubbed her back, telling her that Dad was horrible for not telling her, that she deserved a different outcome and that he completely wasted her time. Again, I was fighting to not smile. When she left, I told her I would always be there for her, but I knew she wasn't going to be part of my life anymore. Why would she? I was the daughter of the man who betrayed her. Once she had left and I was alone, I wept with joy and relief that it paid off, but also deep sorrow that Mum hadn't been there to see it. That was the last time I saw or talked to the co-worker. A few weeks later, Dad called me in a fury. She had packed her bags and left, slapping him with divorce papers. She yelled at him for not being honest with her, that he had a vasectomy that he had no intention of reversing, that he knew she wanted kids and that she had wasted all of her childbearing years and that he had left it to me to tell her. He then said, "How could you do that to us? We loved you." I said in a cold tone, "You and Mum did a good job teaching me how to keep secrets." I hung up and that was it. I never spoke to him again either. The last I heard, he and the co-worker were divorced and everyone shunned him because of him keeping the secret. I know I won't be joining Mum after I die. What I did was cruel. It was horrible. I should have done what Mum wanted and spilled the beans beforehand instead of wasting the co-worker's youth and childbearing years. Even if she could adopt, she'd probably die before her children were fully grown. Although, it's hard to have compassion and mercy for a woman who integrated herself into my dying mum's life as she was screwing my mum's husband. Wow, that was great. What a start to this episode. I've got to be honest with you. I actually think that in your mum's heart of hearts, I reckon that she actually would have wanted you to do what you ended up doing. I know she didn't explicitly say it, and I know she said, "It's in your hands now. You can tell them," or you can tell, the co-worker that your dad isn't being honest with her. But I think what you did was just so much sweeter. It is fair as well. Come on, it is. This co-worker is a horrible, horrible woman. She knows exactly what's going on. She knows that your mum is gonna die very soon, sadly. She's preying on that. And, your dad is equally as bad, if not worse. But them two together are terrible. And yeah, this woman doesn't deserve the satisfaction of having kids. It's simple as that. What I can't get over is your dad saying to you, "How could you do that to us? We loved you." So, sorry, he kept his vasectomy a secret for decades, but then blamed his daughter for eventually telling his new wife after all those years. Absolutely insane. Anyway, let's get into the second story of revenge. This one, to be honest, it's not as nuclear, but I think the payoff might be even better than that. Now moving on to our next story of revenge. This one comes from r/prorevenge. Fired from my job, but received a year's worth of pay and got my boss fired. This happened in the early 2010s before the advancement of technology in video editing and content creation. I was hired as a content creator for a university that wanted to leverage YouTube to kickstart their branding campaign. The pay was low, roughly $2,200, and in those days, there were not that many video content creators around, and the process usually took a long time from start to finish. I was hired, and on my second day, the manager presented my KPI of 85 3 to 10 minute videos in 52 weeks, which was impossible for a one-man team in those days. I mean, even now, that would be extremely hard. Wow. This meant that I had to do the scripting, producing, casting talents, shooting videos, composing music. They were too cheap to pay for a royalty-free music subscription, and editing, all of which I had to use my own equipment and software because their cameras and computers were so old, they simply couldn't handle the strain of even doing things in 720p, much less 1080. Oh my goodness me. I tried to let my manager know, but she just smiled encouragingly, telling me to give it a try, assuring me if the videos were good, the quantity would not be what she focused on. Hearing this, I agreed to give it a try. My manager treated me well in the first month. However, one day when she found out I was a smoker, her attitude changed overnight. A colleague had actually done a facepalm when I told her about it, and she let me know that the manager hated smokers and often advocated to get them fired. She started nitpicking me on everything, from smelling like cigarette smoke after my breaks, coming in 5 to 10 minutes late despite doing more than 4 hours of overtime daily, not being contactable during break times, the list goes on. But I soldiered on because I just wanted to do the work and do it well. One thing I'm not actually sure about is how much is OP getting here, guys? They say that the pay was low, roughly $2,200 US. I presume that is per month. I mean, I hope it's per month. Ideally, it'd be per week, but yeah, if that's per year, well, okay, that's ridiculous. But even if it is that much per month, that is still way too low, surely. OP continues. 5 months in, I was called into the director's office, where I saw my manager putting on her best, displeased but gleeful face, and I felt my stomach drop. The director told me that she was disappointed because she had heard that I was falling behind on my work, and it was already halfway through the year, and I'd only completed 30 out of my 85 videos. I tried to explain that I'd been working my butt off on these videos. I literally worked 6 days out of the week, over 60 hours, just to do what needed to be done, and that being a one-man army made things impossible. And also, the fact that the views I'd put up grossed the highest views ever on their YouTube page. I also recounted how my manager said that she was looking for quality videos over quantity. The director, though, dismissed this and stated that the KPI was simply 85 videos in a year, and since it was almost half a year in, with my numbers at less than half, she felt it prudent to cut the cord early. I asked how would they even meet the KPI if they were to fire me now, and my manager had snorted, saying, "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director had given her an odd look, but nodded in her support nonetheless, telling me, "You don't need to worry, your manager will get the job done." That was when a light bulb went off in my head. Seeing as I was the content professional in the office, one of my jobs was to keep a database of production houses to use in the event that we needed to do a shoot that required more resources. And I was sure that they would be using the production houses in my database, as my manager had no contacts in the production industry. So I changed the contact numbers and messed up all the emails on all of the entries except one. This one, I had a friend working as a junior director, not an assistant director, but a director assigned to smaller video projects. I gave him a call and told him of my plan, and sure enough, within 2 days, they were called to come in to pitch. I told him that I had a plan that was a win-win for us. It would instantly help him and put him on the fast track to a director position by bringing in that much business to his production house, and it would also benefit me financially. I would teach him exactly how to pitch to win over the boss and the director, and in turn, his company would pay me a standard finder's fee of 15%. He agreed instantly and immediately put me on the line with his general manager, who, upon realizing this was to be 6 months of work for a high 6-digit payout, instantly agreed and drew up a contract. Sorry, are you telling me that these guys were only willing to pay you $2,200 per month, but now willing to pay over, 6 digits, over $100,000 for the next 6 months? Insane. As it turns out, after I gave them a metaphorical step-by-step playbook, they were the perfect fit, somehow understanding the needs and style of the university, as well as the sort of themes the university wanted to feature. The director and my former boss were amazed that my friend's production house was so familiar with their content that they signed them on the spot. Now, even back then, using a production house was not cheap. Each video that they produced could cost double to triple my monthly salary, given that they had specialized people for each function. Producer, director, director of photography, gaffer, sound person, video editor, assistant director, production assistants, etc. But this meant that they could complete a video every 2 to 3 days. So yes, they produced 50 videos in a span of 4 months for over 100 months of my salary. And I sat back and collected the healthy 15%, which was about 15 months of my salary. This allowed me to put money aside for a holiday and the rest to further my studies with a respected film school overseas. Wow. Okay, so they're getting 100 months of OP's salary. That means that the university are paying them $220,000, over $220,000 to do this work when they were only paying OP $2,200 per month. That is crazy. OP continues, I thought my plan ended here and I'd gotten back at my former bosses. But to my surprise, I received a call from my colleague while I was holidaying in Bali one day. This was the same colleague who had facepalmed when I told her that my manager had found out that I was a smoker. She told me that my former manager had been fired and my director given a massive blasting by the chancellor of the uni. The content creation project which I was hired for was only given a budget equating to about 1.5 years of my salary, and they'd exceeded that budget by over 10 times. My former manager was so desperate to ensure that her content creation project could be completed that she'd thrown caution to the wind, paying anything to get the job done so that she could show my director that she had completed the project and had approved the massive spend without getting consent from the director. So that is how I got my friend a super fast promotion to a full director in his production house and 1 year of pay after getting unfairly fired from my job. That was phenomenal. Okay, that was a great story, and I can actually speak firsthand from my own experience here. When you are trying to make videos completely yourself, and now fortunately in this day and age, the channel's done well enough that I can have some other people help me. For example, I don't edit the videos anymore, all the episodes. Steve-O does that. A lot of you guys will know him. He's been with me for over 5 years now. Shout out Steve-O. But if you're doing it all on your own, it is so challenging. To be honest, I don't really know how I did it when I was doing it on my own, and my videos aren't even that that taxing really. But filming it all yourself, narrating it all yourself, and then editing it, making it into a video, doing the thumbnail, like getting camera equipment, all that sort of stuff, it takes a lot of effort. And this is not like uni level sort of showing off the university, trying to get whatever the point of the channel was. Like, I'm just reading stories, and that was a lot of effort. But goodness me, I don't know how the uni thought you were able to do this, or were going to be able to do this on your own to that level. That quantity is insane. It's just like they just don't understand it. Like they've asked OP to be a full production studio on their own, using all their own equipment. It's ridiculous. And then they've just gone, actually, you know what? Yeah, let's just spend loads of money, and I think we'll get away with it because we might get some views. Like, if that's part of your actual strategy, fair enough. If you want to, spend a lot of money, and I think it would probably be worth it. I think, to be honest, I was quite impressed at the start of this when you said that back in the early 2010s, a university was looking to leverage YouTube to kickstart their branding campaign. That is great. I'd encourage every university to do that, and the majority, to be fair, do that now. But back in the early 2010s, that's forward thinking. So respect to them a little bit for that, genuinely, but not in the way they went about it. that is just awful. So bad, and they need to give their brains a wobble, and thankfully they're not in the role anymore. Good stuff, and congratulations for getting a great lump of severance and helping your mate out as well. I hunted down my credit card thieves. Yesterday morning, I received an email notification from my credit card company stating a transaction for $1,500 at a med spa was declined, and another stating it was approved. I immediately called said credit card company to report the fraudulent charge. Turns out, my card has had fraudulent charges over the past 3 weeks, with purchases including various hotels in my area, eBay, gas station, self-storage, and moving truck rental. Now, I rarely use this card. The last time I used it in person was in February, and my last online purchase with it was in 2023. Fortunately, my credit card company flagged all recent charges and closed my card. This morning, my significant other had a doctor's appointment in the same city as a hotel purchase made yesterday. After the appointment, my boyfriend asked me what I thought we should do today. I said, well, you wanted to shop for some new shoes, or we can swing by this hotel up the street and see if the credit card thieves are still there. The amount charged seems like it would cover 2 or 3 days. So my boyfriend and I go to the hotel to see if the people were still checked in and to let them know the card was stolen and the charges would be reversed. The front desk lady was fuming. She was able to find the reservation by card number and noted that the person had kept changing cards to pay for the room. Of course, they didn't tell me the room number, much to my boyfriend's dismay. My boyfriend was hoping to get a room key to take their stuff. Yeah, right. I called the credit card company and they asked me to call the police. I called the sheriff's department and they arrived within 20 minutes. I was surprised they actually even came. I gave them my report, ID, and credit card. The deputy asked if I wanted to prosecute, and I said yes. But can I prosecute if my credit card company is going to refund all the money anyway? Then they went inside and spoke to the front desk, who provided them the invoice. My boyfriend and I waited outside in front of the lobby. Then, through the automatic sliding doors, I hear the front desk lady yell, That's him! He's trying to leave! A light Hispanic dude with a bull terrier and several bags gets placed in cuffs. He gets brought outside, searched, and the doggo gets cuffed to a trash can. Oh wow. Then another little Asian guy gets brought out in cuffs. A third deputy arrives and brings out a fancy Asian lady with a face full of fillers, 2 suitcases, and a Coach backpack. 4 officers start going through the backpacks on the hood of their car. We see passports, IDs, credit cards. They pull out a big credit card printing machine and a laptop. Then they pull out a big Ziploc filled with crystal meth, and the cop exclaims, "Here we go," and turns towards us to flash a smile. 2 of them go back to search the hotel room and bring down 2 bags with more drugs, a scale, 4 car keys, and a big wad of cash. Unfortunately, none of the cars were in the parking lot, and the perp said they'd been traveling by Uber. The cops contacted one of the thief's friends to pick up the dog, who arrived pretty quickly. It was an older Asian dude with tattoos, flashy jewelry, in an old luxury SUV. Don't worry, we got his pics and license plates. All these guys seem like characters out of The Brother's Son. The deputies then gave me all the paperwork and told me that one of the guys said they stole my card off of the internet. I would have guessed that they used the scanner while I was at the fair a few weeks ago. I find that so weird because I haven't used my card online in almost a year. Apparently they made a physical card that had a different name on it. Anywho, I walked inside to give the front desk a copy of the incident number, and then I remembered something else. I remember seeing another transaction for a storage unit that was made yesterday and 2 charges at a rental truck company. I go back outside and talk to the sheriff, and I asked him if he wanted me to try and figure out where that was. I was able to track down the storage location to a city about 15 minutes away, but no can do on the trucks. I called the storage place and they confirmed that a payment was made with my card, but would not give me the unit number. From there, the sheriff said that it was out of their jurisdiction and they would try to get a search warrant, but that might take a while. However, it might be helpful if I made a police report with the other city. So, with nothing better to do, I drove my butt over there and made another police report regarding the storage unit. So that is it for now. I'll update if anything else happens. In the meantime, I will call up the credit bureau to freeze my social security, tell my dog to be on alert, and load magazines. Any other suggestions? Also, the copper asked if I wanted to prosecute, but that was before the drugs bust. So do I now need a lawyer? Thanks in advance. Wow, I did not expect this when I first read the title, which was just hunting down credit card thieves. You know, it happens. It's annoying, but normally you get your money back, and credit card thieves are pretty terrible people, but you know, they're just fraudulent. They're just trying to steal some money, not like terrible people. But yeah, these guys, wow, they had something else going on. Unbelievable. I mean, I say they're not terrible people. They are terrible people, but there are levels to terrible, if you guys get what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, just go to town on them as much as you can. I don't think you need a lawyer. I think your lawyer is the prosecutor, right? But yeah, just get them to trial as quickly as you can, and be a witness and just dominate. That's what I'd do anyway. It's just pretty crazy how something that started off as, yeah, maybe pretty normal. I mean, credit card fraud does happen a lot, sadly. Eventually ended up with this, and people running out of a hotel, just, yeah, bags and bags of drugs in the room. Oh god, crazy operation going on, and you're the one that's uncovered it. Fair play, OP. Okay, now for our pro-revenge story of this episode. Cable company kept calling to recharge even after disconnecting service. Booked tech support to fix non-existent TV box. My old TV finally broke down, so I got a new smart TV. A couple of weeks later, I realized that no one in the family watches any TV channels. Everyone goes for streaming content. I decided that it's not worth it to pay for the TV connection anymore. Now, my TV connection is added into my phone plan along with my internet as well, so disconnecting it was not straightforward. It was a custom plan with its own dedicated relationship team. It took several calls to the team to find a resolution, which was to convert the TV connection to a prepaid one and then stop recharging. After the conversion was done, I got messages for a few weeks to recharge and then finally a message to return the set-top box. I responded to that, and in a few days, the box was collected from my place. Good riddance. Or so I thought. Next up, started some calls from random call centers for recharging. It felt different from the dedicated relationship team. I googled and found out that this had become the practice in my country. The company had outsourced this part of the support to a third party, and they simply checked from the printed database about people who had a connection but did not recharge last month. Since my disconnection was in the middle of the month and their printed database was from the beginning, they didn't have this updated info. Now obviously I tried my best to inform them about this, but to no avail. So I started talking to the callers, informing them of the fake problem my TV was having connecting to the set-top box and that multiple support requests have fallen on deaf ears. I also started recording the calls. Third caller took it seriously and booked tech support. I got a call from a field tech within hours. He came by. I greeted him with drinks and I informed him about the real issue, and we had a good laugh. He suggested that I keep it up a few more times for good measure. Wow, the tech support himself is saying that, yeah, actually the practices of my company aren't great. Just keep doing it. After 8 tech support visits, finally they got the message. To be fair, I suppose the tech support would still be getting paid for his or her time, right? So it doesn't really matter to them. Wow. I got a call from a supervisor asking why I was booking tech support when clearly I didn't have a connection anymore. I mailed him the call recordings. He was pretty annoyed, but I stopped getting calls so much. Any call I get now, which is rare, maybe once in a couple of weeks, I just read from the same script. And if someone takes it seriously enough to try and book tech support, they get a short note against my ID to not bother this gentleman. Oh wow, there is nothing more annoying than this. When you've cancelled with a company, or you're trying your best to cancel with a company, and either they're just saying, nah, this can't be done, or like, you're locked into a deal here, etc., and there's just no leeway at all. Or, in this more rare case, you have actually cancelled and they're still acting as if you haven't and you're still a customer with them. Very, very strange. As I said while reading, I'm kind of like loving the fact that the tech support guy was saying, actually, yes, it's a bit of a disgrace. You should just keep doing this and keep calling me. I don't really care. Or keep calling one of my colleagues. Who really cares? But yeah, this is going on. It's just so annoying. In the same way that they're saying, why do you keep booking tech support when you don't have a connection anymore? Like, stop wasting our time. Well, you could ask them, why are you responding to support claims if you know that I don't have a connection anymore? Why are you wasting my time? So it works both ways. Now moving on to our third story. This one from r/petty revenge. Bought an alarm to go off whenever someone leaves the baby gate open. I am cackling right now. My teenager and husband are constantly leaving the baby gates I have installed on the stairs and door to the mudroom open. The dog will then go into the mudroom and eat the cat litter, or she'll pee on the carpeted landing, or go up to our room to get into our trash, or the diaper pail. It drives me bananas. Making them clean it up doesn't seem to deter them from constantly forgetting to shut the gates. My teenager maintains that they don't leave the gate open. So, I bought one of those window alarms that has a separate magnet and then the main unit. So when you separate them, it alarms that the window is open. You can put these things just about anywhere, such as doors, the fridge or freezer, cabinets, etc. You can also set a delay, which is what I did, so it isn't alarming just from someone walking through. Currently upstairs with a toddler for a nap, and I heard the teenager go down the stairs. And 30 seconds later, the alarm starts going off. I sent them laughing face emojis, and they just said, die. I responded with a kissy face and offered to turn it up louder if they'd like me to. But I'm sitting here trying not to wake the baby up from laughing. I didn't tell my husband I bought these alarms, so I can't wait for him to come home and find out about them too. Now OP's added a little edit here. For those saying the timer should be shorter, I agree, I just don't have another option. There are 3 settings: 0-second delay and the alarm plays every 5 seconds, 30-second delay and the alarm plays every 20 seconds, or 0-second delay and the alarm plays continuously. Other alarms I was looking at had similar options. This is just the one that was cost effective, came in a 2-pack, and could get here within a day. My husband is home, but hasn't yet gone upstairs or through the mudroom yet. He usually skips the mudroom and comes inside through the sliding doors. It's almost toddler bath time, so I'm sure it will happen soon. And OP has added this update. Husband did indeed leave the gate open. He made it back over to the stove where he had the loud fans on, so he didn't immediately hear the alarm. Everyone else heard it, and I said, "Who left the gate open?" My middle child immediately gave up my husband and said he did it. My husband said, "It wasn't me," and she fired back at him that he just came down the stairs and it definitely was him. Then the alarm went off again and he said, "What is that?" And then, "Really, babe?" before rolling his eyes and marching over to fix the gate. Everyone got a pretty good laugh about it. I'll have to give it a trial run and see how well it deters them from leaving it open in the future. And OP has also added one more final update. I worked nights all weekend and slept during most of the day on Saturday and Sunday. Throughout that time, I heard the gate alarms go off frequently. The teenagers stayed in their room most of the time, so it was definitely my husband setting it off the majority of the time. I haven't rubbed it in his face, yet. He knows that I know that he's aware he's the problem. To his credit, he hasn't complained about it. At least, not to my face, though I did hear him say, "Oh god damn it," once before going back to shut the gate. And neither he nor the teenager have decided to just flip the off switch on the side, so at least they're going along with it. The teenager is much more vocal about their hatred of the alarm. He said it's a very overstimulating sound, to which I said, then I guess you'd better shut the gate, eh? They're proving to be much more trainable than my husband, but hopefully with a few more weeks of Pavloving him, he'll just do it automatically. Thanks for all the comments. I got a lot of chuckles out of them. Maybe it's just me, but I kind of love the fact that the alarm doesn't go off immediately, because it's like for them, it's even more annoying than if the alarm went off immediately and they quickly said, "Oh, I've forgotten. I'll close it and the alarm will stop," etc. Instead, no, they've gone like 30 seconds away from the gate and then have to come 30 seconds back. Or they've sort of like forgotten about it, but then, 30 seconds later, they're like, "Oh God, really? I'm now doing something else," for example. But you know what I mean? It's just like, I actually think that the later the alarm is, the better. It's just funnier. Surely this is going to work, by the way, as well. Like, obviously, it's extremely annoying, but that's kind of the point. Like, the more annoying something is every time you do it, surely the more likely you are to more quickly fix it and stop doing it. Again, if the alarm was instant, they might be more like your husband and your kids might be more likely just to forget about it and then be like, "Oh, it's fine, it's done, like close it again." Whereas now, every time, even when they're going through that part of your house, they're going to be thinking, "Oh my God, it's so annoying when I forget and I have to go back and, it's been 30 seconds already. So now I'm just going to 100% remember and it's going to become a habit." I don't know. This surely would work. I mean, it would work on me. This would really annoy me. It's great stuff and just a very, very good idea. Decline to pay me after I help you pass your exam. Have fun getting deported. So this happened a couple of years ago during COVID when everything was online. A mutual friend, let's call him Dan, reached out to me, absolutely desperate. He was on the verge of getting deported because he'd already failed his coding exam twice. One more and he wouldn't be able to stay in the country. He knew I was good at coding and begged me to take the exam for him. He told me how his entire future depended on it, how he had no options left, etc. Feeling a bit sorry for him, I agreed, on the condition that he would pay me $500 for doing it. He agreed immediately, so I spent a couple of weeks preparing. The exam was proctored over Zoom, and we set it up so that I could control his computer remotely while he pretended to take the exam himself. We pulled it off without a hitch, and he passed the exam. Afterwards, we went out for drinks to celebrate. We each paid our own share because I didn't want him deducting anything from what he owed me. Now here is where things went downhill. He gave me $100 up front and promised to pay the remaining $400 in a couple of weeks after he sorted out his graduation stuff. Weeks turned into months and he kept dodging me with excuses. After 6 months of this, it became clear that he wasn't going to pay me back. I gave him multiple warnings to pay me or I'll report him, but he kept taking it lightly and blocked me. I've got to interject here, guys. When somebody has this much power over you, knowing that you've cheated in your exam because they did the exam for you, surely you have to pay them what you agreed. It's just too risky. Anyway, let's carry on. I was fuming. I helped him out and he completely ghosted me after getting what he wanted. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, I reported him to his university for academic misconduct. I explained in detail how I was the one who took the exam for him and I provided the evidence to back it up. They investigated and failed him retroactively, which meant, of course, he couldn't graduate. Since his visa was tied to his student status, this basically screwed him over completely. Some context. It was an anonymous tip-off to the college with a fake email with all the proof. They called him and gave him a chance to retake the exam on the spot, but the guy never studied and failed at the most basic stuff. But it didn't end there. He was still living in the country illegally, hoping to somehow fix things. I knew he had no way out, so then I anonymously tipped off the authorities, saying there was an illegal immigrant involved in suspicious activity living in my area. They came, found out he was there illegally, and he got deported. Context. As for the deportation, I felt a bit scared in case he tried to hurt me in some way, so that's why I made sure he never set foot in this country again. Now, some mutual friends are saying that I went too far, that it was a petty move to ruin his entire life over $400. On the one hand, I feel like he deserved it for trying to scam me. Now, I wouldn't have minded if he came clean, saying that he doesn't have the money or financial capacity to pay, and that he was sorry. I would have let the matter go without a hitch. I actually posted on another subreddit, r/AmITheJerk, but I started getting death threats. I feel like you guys here wouldn't mind this. And then for those of you listening on podcast platforms, OP has added a little devil emoji at the end. And you know what, OP, you're absolutely right. I don't just not mind it, I love it. Yeah, as I said during this post, I mean, you're just an idiot if you think that you're going to get away with something like this and then not pay the person what you told them to pay. It's so dumb. They have all the power in their hands to just say to you, like, are you joking? I'm obviously just going to go and tell on you because you've not paid me. By the way, this person's taking a risk as well. I want to make that abundantly clear. OP is not like just doing this for free in the literal sense and also in the metaphorical sense, you know? You're not allowed to do this. Now, it's probably not illegal. Of course it's not, but I don't know. I feel like something could happen potentially to you if you were found to actively be helping out someone else cheating in an exam. Maybe not, but whatever. Obviously, ethically, it's wrong. So there is some risk from OP there. And yeah, just again, all I can think is just it's so dumb to just know that somebody has all the evidence against you, but then not pay them and just try and get away with it. I suppose the sort of person that would do this in the first place and cheat this badly to try and pass a test would probably be the same sort of person that would try and con one of their friends out of a lot of money. Maybe it adds up, actually. Okay, now moving on to our next story. Kill my cat, get smashed. This is a story from my childhood. I lived in a small suburban neighborhood in the 90s. We had 2 Dachshunds we kept in a backyard fence, and 3 cats that just roamed our 1/8 acre corner lot in my subdivision. Of the 3 cats, Magic was the matriarch. She was a big fat black cat that didn't really run from any neighborhood cats or dogs. Our neighbors across the street had a pit bull that they would let roam the neighborhood. It was never aggressive towards me or my friends, but also was not a friendly dog. We just stayed away from it when playing in the woods. One day, that pit bull charged my cat while I was in the yard playing. It began to whip its head back and forth, shaking Magic, and I ran in to get my dad. We didn't have a gun for home defense. My dad kept a 4-foot long galvanized steel rod that was about 1 inch thick next to the door though. I've never seen him move that fast. He was on that dog in about 5 seconds flat. I remember seeing him strike the dog probably 3 times before it let go of Magic. My dad said, "Come here, OP, we are going to the neighbor's house." He was fuming, shaking. When I got closer, I could see that the dog's skull was completely smashed. You could see blood and grey matter. It was gnarly. Its eye socket was also smashed. He picked up the dead dog and walked with me to the owner's house. The man answered the door and said, "What did you do to my dog?" And my dad said, "The same goddamn thing I'm gonna do to you if this happens to one of my kids." They never got another dog. We never saw them again, and they moved about a year later. Now, Opie's added a little edit here onto the end of this one, saying, "I might be lost. I felt like the nature of dragging the bloody dog back to the owner and threatening them with the same for killing the cat was revenge, but maybe not." That's after a few comments below were saying that this wasn't really revenge, it just was animal cruelty. Let me know what you guys think about that, by the way. OP continues, "I also see the comments about animal cruelty and being a psycho or something when I've posted this story on Reddit before. I don't think you all understand how much this marked me." To be fair, OP's still thinking about this, writing about this event, I don't know how many years later, but this happened in the 90s, so what, 20 years minimum, probably 30 years. I focused on facts in this post, not feelings, because the feelings are very painful, they continue. "It was 30 years ago now, wow, there we go, and I can still remember very minute details of the scene, and I remember going on a roller coaster, from terrified that I was going to die, to scared that my dad was going to die, to scared and then sad about Magic and the dog, to scared about confronting the parents, and then to a deep mourning for my favourite cat. Even to this day, it's the best cat I've ever had. I'm not sure why you'd expect this to be some kind of morality tale. It's just what happened." Yeah, no doubt in my mind, this is definitely revenge and it's definitely nuclear. I mean, the dog killed your cat, your dad killed the dog and showed it to the owner saying, if that happens to one of my children, this is going to happen to you. I think that's a definition of nuclear revenge. I suppose you could argue that this sort of story is probably a little bit more suited to r/traumatize them back, but it's much of a muchness, really. It's definitely nuclear revenge. As for the story itself, yeah, terrible thing to happen. All I can really say is poor magic, and I'm so sorry to you, OP, that this is still affecting you or has had such an effect on your life, to which, yeah, you're still traumatized by it, or at least think about it regularly often 30 years later. I guess that just shows, to be fair, why this revenge had to happen when it did. It's had that effect on you. Crazy. Okay, now moving on to our next story. This one is from 5 months ago, and some of you may have seen it already, some of you might not have done, but the reason I'm reading it today is because just the other day, a brand new update to it was posted. So let's read the original first. Aunt broke my model kit, so I took away her everything. This whole thing started exactly a year ago, but just ended, and a friend told me to post here, so off we go. I live in Turkey, and as you know, southeast of my country was wrecked by a couple of giant earthquakes a year ago. My city was the epicenter, and while the house I lived in with my family wasn't destroyed, a lot of shelves got knocked off, and one of them was the one where I held my Gunpla kits. Out of all the kits I had, only one survived, an MG-THE-O that was heavily customized. I built it with my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, so I was ecstatic it survived. A few months after everything had calmed down, my mother called her relatives for dinner, which included Aunt B. Now, the B doesn't stand for female dog here. Her name does start with the letter B. I can't remember what I called her a few months ago, but I'll call her Brenda today. She came alongside her son, who is 8 and is an entitled brat. While the adults were drinking coffee, this little brat barged into my room and demanded to play with my computer. Now, I refused, since I was editing a video for my college society and I had the camera on. Well, the brat went back crying to her mother, who came and started yelling at me. While I was dealing with her, her little brat climbed onto my desk, took my model kit, and immediately dropped it and stepped on it. The rest is just yelling, me swearing at them up and down, telling them they were going to pay for it, with her calling me a weirdo for still having toys and that she wasn't going to pay for anything. My mother at first thought about not making her pay to keep the peace, but when she realized it was the kit I made with my late grandfather, her father, she was angrier than I was and went out for blood. We took the case to a friend of ours who is a lawyer that specializes with in-family cases, and they told us since my camera caught it all, we would definitely win, but it was better to come to an agreement out of court in a settlement since it would be cheaper. I pulled out a price list of the kits I needed to make an exact replica of the one that was destroyed, and it came to just about $1,000 US, which came to about 25 to 27,000 Turkish lira with the exchange rate. Well, she refused, so we took her to court. She pulled all kinds of BS to not pay and delay, but the judge ended up making her pay $1,650 US, plus an order for her to pay any border taxes on the replacement kits alongside the court and lawyer fees. It completely screwed her savings, and her husband, who was already waiting for a chance to divorce, took it. When it all ended up, she had nothing, and even lost custody of her brat to her ex-husband, and not only lost the down payment she had for a house, she lost all her savings and didn't get alimony from her husband. Am I happy her life got completely screwed? No, not really. But do I feel sorry that it happened? Not in the slightest. She and her crotch goblin screwed around and found out. It's that simple. I do feel bad for her husband though. He's going to be the one trying to make that brat into a normal person, and I don't envy it in the slightest. Now, as I said, some of you guys may remember that story from a few months ago, but at the time of recording, just 23 hours ago, we got the following update, and that is why I had to bring this story to you guys again. Well, the time the judge gave my aunt to pay what she owed me came and went, but she didn't make any payment at all. So we legally had to push the case into legal collectment. Cops went to her house, but she wasn't there. She was actually in her house, but didn't make any noise. So the cops had to leave and get a search permit to enter to look for her. They found her inside, having sold her everything, ready to illegally leave the country to not pay anything and start a new life abroad. When they were apprehending her, she attacked the cops, actually clawed the eye of one, causing permanent damage and adding multiple charges to her file. She was taken to court again, this time for more crimes, alongside not making a payment in time that the court told her to last time. I'm not sure if I can legally list all the things she was charged with, but in the end, she got 18 years and 9 months of jail time with no chance of parole until the 15th year. And yes, since she'd sold everything of hers to leave the country, the court took the amount she had to pay us, recalculated to today's tax numbers and exchange rates, before putting the rest of the money in an account that her son would get when he turns 18. Now, as for her brat, in the first post, I said that when her husband divorced her, he got custody. Well, the kid's personality was so bad that he took him to a psychiatrist who decided, because of my aunt's terrible parenting, he was showing personality issues. He is now in a pre-military boarding school for troubled kids, which he hates completely. As for the money, I'd love to say I used it to get the parts necessary to remake that kit, but I had to put it into a savings account. The government recently changed border tax systems, so the previous money became a substantial amount with the new numbers, like hilariously so. As much as I'd love to spend it all on Gunpla, I have to think about the future, so it's gonna stay in a savings account, getting fatter by the day until I graduate. Okay, so there we go. 18 years is pretty insane. I'm just reading through the comments here to try and understand whether or not that's legit or not, because 18 years does sound pretty ridiculous for what happened. But bear with me here. So somebody said, 18 years? Mental note, don't mess with you. And OP said, most of it was when she attacked the cops apprehending her. I think she got like 1.5 to 2 years for not paying. To be fair, in the Turkish criminal system, I could imagine that permanently damaging a cop's eye would be pretty insane jail time. I'm not sure it would be 20 years or 18 years in the UK, but you never know. You never know. I mean, comment down below, guys. In your country, wherever you're watching, how long do you think you get in jail time for that? Attacking and causing permanent damage to an officer is one of the worst things you can do. I mean, I know in the UK and in the US, for example, if you murder or kill, sorry, not murder, but kill a member of the police or the military or whatever, that is one of the most serious things you can do in terms of a sentence. So yeah, there we go. Pretty insane. And I remember last time you guys told me what Gunpla was, so I looked it up and now I know, so don't worry, I'm learning. Let me just go back to the comments because I can search in my comment section Gunpla or Gunpla, and you guys told me it's short for Gundam Plastic Model. So it's in here now. Don't worry, I'll never forget on my life. Got fired, reported them to OSHA, destroyed a family business, and made them leave town. So, a while back, I'd been hired to be the marketing person for a family business. It was a fitness equipment liquidator that had been founded by a gold medalist Olympian. He'd fallen into some mental health issues and had delegated his wife to take over the business. She didn't have the experience, but took the reins anyways, and she and her children ran the place, albeit with some success. So this is where I come in. The first red flag I should have seen was that she was trying to screw over the recruiter by wanting us to do a side deal to pay me technically less, but still more than I would have gotten without the recruiter as the middle person. But I was in bed and I didn't think too much about it. The next thing was how embedded the family aspect was in this business. There was basically no distinction between the employees and family affairs being wrapped up in their work environment too. But I was just happy to finally be in a space where I felt welcome and almost love-bombed by the CEO, who treated me like one of her own children. Always lots of hugs and even kisses during good morning meetings, as if we were coming downstairs for breakfast. Meetings ended up turning into brainstorming sessions because the CEO's children and the workers were so scatterbrained and didn't want to commit to any specific plans of action, and I was basically on my own when it came to any marketing of anything because nobody would actually participate if it came down to it. About a month or so into it, I get ambushed by the CEO and her daughter, who was like the operations person technically or something. Both were wondering why we hadn't achieved as much as I had wanted to. And when I explained that I didn't really receive much help or participation from anyone, suddenly it became all about blaming me for everything wrong and why sales were down and why nothing was exponentially growing as she had hoped they would. I explained what actions I'd taken and that I was doing exactly what I said I was going to do. It wasn't my fault that nobody wanted to help when they said they would. It didn't matter. They wanted me gone because they expected the moon in 3 weeks' time with zero budget and zero help from anyone else. So I just left. I want to add that I did a lot while there. I automated a lot of their processes that they were doing by hand. I set up Salesforce and Slack, as well as setting up and handling Zendesk and a ticketing system, and even automating a lot of POS processes, from card tap to accounting. It was all smooth and seamless, and I made tons of things very efficient for them, and I improved productivity while there. But none of that mattered, of course. They wanted double the sales from basically social media posting and nothing else. While I was there, I had documented tons of OSHA violations, exposed wires where customers would walk, ADA violations, customer safety violations, forklifts operated with zero certification and no PPE, and having employees standing on top of the forks just to reach the warehouse ceiling, with no safety anything. Structural violations, you name it, they did landlord special type fixes and left things in often worse states than before. So I made the call and I sent OSHA photos of what I documented, which I had only documented in the event of needing to use. I never actually expected it to come to this, but it did. After talking with them, it was explained to me that there was months-long processes to get actions to be taken, even with evidence. The penalties for the violations I had evidence for were financially crippling fines I knew they wouldn't be able to handle. And after months of checking every now and then, I got confirmation that action was taken. Then, a couple of months later, I drove past the warehouse and showroom and I saw that it was abandoned. Broken letters, overgrown grass in the parking lot, boarded up windows and doors, for lease, all gone, and dilapidated. While I was placing those calls, I was also reaching out to my realtor friend, who is super good at what she does, saying that we should time it right so that after these fines and penalties, she can drop literature off at their door until they're convinced to sell. She didn't do it in time, but she did catch wind that the house had been sold, and sold fast. Their website was 404'd, and they basically packed their bags and left. I still can't believe it worked, but sometimes in life we have to accept that we are the karma that someone has coming to them. Goodbye, Amy, wherever you and your family left to. We're even. Oh my goodness me. I feel like that just went up a notch, the last two sentences there. First of all, I completely agree. We have to accept that we are the karma sometimes that someone has coming to them. Unbelievable, aka take matters into your own hands. And secondly, OP just name dropped Amy at the end there. I mean, we didn't have any mention of any name before that at all. I thought it was going to be a completely nameless for identity reasons and secrecy post. But no, Amy, if you're listening, turns out you're now even with OP. Okay, there we go. And as I said, the final sentences there are just so good. I do agree with OP though, to be fair, especially about the fact that you have to accept that we are the karma sometimes that someone has coming to them. Because if OP did nothing and just, sat back, took the L, got fired, whatever, moved on with his life, nothing would have happened here, most likely. Yeah, down the line, something may well have done, but immediately nothing would have done. And these terrible working conditions that just seem so unsafe. Could have just kept going forever and ever. And who knows what complications or devastation that could have caused down the line. I'm thinking about someone being on top of a forklift trying to get to a top shelf or something. That is just, serious accident at best, death at worst sort of potential. If anything, maybe actually that disproves OP's point. The real karma could have been him getting fired, doing nothing, then someone falling off a forklift, ideally the CEO, and dying. If you want karma, death is probably a pretty clear example of it. So guys, comment down below, what do you think? Do you think OP did the right thing here? Or should he have just, quietly gone about his business, got fired, and let someone die by falling off a forklift? It's much of a muchness. I'm not sure where I stand. Now moving on to our second revenge story. Oh, I played the long game. I am by no means an expert or pro at revenge, but I am a patient person. I disclosed this to a friend and they directed me here. 7 years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own place. I'd saved for 10 years, worked my butt off, and I was so happy to be able to have a place to call my own. Now, being a single person on the mortgage meant I had to make compromises. One such compromise was buying a property on a shared block, a lot cheaper. Where I'm from, this usually means it's on a strata title. For some, that's a bonus, as it means there's a communal fund for repairs. Typically, insurance is cheaper as it's collective, and other things like maintenance being taken care of. Strata titles also come with a lot of bylaws and restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm a pretty private and introverted person, so having to deal with people and have limits on how I live was a no-no. I took my time and I found the perfect property. Shared block, but freehold title. Only thing was, I needed to pay public liability insurance for the shared walkway on the property, split equally between owners. The real estate agent is local to my area. There's also about 3 degrees of separation between us. He has friends who are friends with my friends type of thing. I didn't know him, but I knew of him, so that sort of felt good too. About 5 months after I move in, I get a knock on the door from the owner, the landlord, of the property next to me, to discuss insurance. Not a problem, I ask for a copy of the policy so I have a record. It gets sent through and lo and behold, it's for strata insurance. I was incredibly confused, and after much back and forth, the property isn't a freehold title, but actually a strata title. I called my lawyer who conveyed the title, etc. He was dumbfounded, but then did the right thing and made things as right as they could. I arranged for a meeting with the real estate agent. I brought emails and printouts of the ads they had, all saying it was freehold, emails between the real estate agent and my lawyer discussing its freehold status. But despite it being in absolute black and white, he refused to accept any fault or offer anything to make things right. I don't begrudge that. He's looking out for himself. I get that. However, I wouldn't forget it. Sorry, I've got to disagree with OP there, and I know we're about to get into the revenge, but are you joking? You've been missold here. It's completely on the realtor to do something about it, even if it affects him negatively. I mean, I hope it does affect him negatively. He's got it so badly wrong and sold you something that isn't actually what you've bought. Anyway, OP continues. I did enter into mediation with the real estate agent, and all I asked for was, when the time came for me to sell, they'd do it or cover the costs. I thought this was reasonable, but they flat out refused and offered me $1,000 to go away, which I refused. I had the option to pursue them legally, and I was advised by the mediator to do so, but ultimately I decided against it for a few reasons, the main one being my health at the time. So I planned and plotted, and I schemed and connived as to how to get back at this son of a female dog. And I settled on this. I found his personal Facebook page, which wasn't set to private. I saw some photos of a boys on tour trip that he went on a few weeks prior, so about 5 to 6 months after I bought the property. I also found his address through a business registration search. On the anniversary of the sale, for 6 years straight, I sent them flowers with a note. Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day. She has your eyes, love, L. They varied ever so slightly over the years, but always had on this, our special day, and some weird inference to a love child and a desire to reconnect. Oh, I've just realized as well, guys, this is brilliant. OP's throwaway account username is on this, our day. So good. OP says, I also from time to time arrange for postcards and letters to be sent from another country. The one he was on tour in always signed Love L. I learned about 3 weeks ago that this guy had recently divorced, lost his home, and is no longer working as a real estate agent. His wife had found out that he cheated on her. The story I was told, through said friends of friends, went along the lines of, he would get weird gifts and flowers every year, the same day, every year. She, his wife, finally put 2 and 2 together and realised what the date was, and he admitted to cheating on her. Now, I didn't mean for this, but it turns out a year before I bought my house, he'd gone on holiday, came back with an STD, gave it to his wife, but somehow convinced her that it wasn't him. As such, our special day turned out to be right around the time that he'd have been deep, without a condom, in someone who wasn't his wife, only 1 year earlier. He's apparently lost his house, half his retirement savings, and also his business. I do feel a little bit guilty about all of it sometimes, but then I'm reminded that he's a scumbag, and that karma, like me, is a patient, spiteful, and vengeful female dog. Oh my goodness me. I mean, this is just great revenge. Really, really, really good. Now, the thing that does stand out to me a little bit is that I'm not sure this should have ever got through the lawyer, you know, your title attorney, because they are clearly just have not done their job well enough. If something that to be honest, sounds quite basic has been able to go through their processes and they've not caught it. It's a big difference. I mean, I don't know much here, but just from what you've explained, OP, it's pretty different from owning a place yourself to having a strata title. I imagine it's probably one of the immediate things that you would check, who owns the property. Let's make that 100% sure that we know that before you'd even get into the finer details of whatever happens next when purchasing a property. But yeah, nonetheless, great revenge. Imagine being that guy. And the thing is, we don't actually even know if this guy ever realized that the person who he actually did cheat with back in the day wasn't the one sending these messages. And yes, obviously it's a big coincidence, but nonetheless, this is what has sparked it in the first place. And also, I'd have to say that the fact that he was caught is deserved anyway for cheating in the first place. I don't know how he managed to get away with, giving his wife an STD. Pretty ridiculous, but I just feel good for his wife that she's out of that relationship. And I know you said at the end, OP, that you do feel a little bit guilty sometimes, but I wouldn't. Just, you're right. He is such a scumbag, and you know full well that if you were his wife, you would have wanted you to do that in this situation. She deserves to know the truth, and you didn't know it was the truth, but in a way, you got to the truth, so you did your job. And if you ever feel bad about what you did, just think about how much his wife's life has probably improved. The fact that he's not in it anymore. Revenge on an animal abuser. One day, I was on my evening walk with my dog, and we came across a small dog standing in the middle of the street, shaking. Its hair was matted, it had mange, it was ridden with fleas, one eye was swollen and sealed shut with mucus. Its nails were so long it was walking on the back of its paws, malnourished and quivering. I was shocked. I called my wife to bring me a blanket and come and pick us up. While I was waiting, the door of the house in front of us opened, and out came a disheveled looking older man. He started calling for the dog to come inside. I absolutely lost it. I screamed at him, asking if it was his dog, and he replied it was. I asked him why it was in such bad shape, and he said, "She's sick and won't eat." I yelled at him there was no freaking way in the world I was letting him take her back inside. The shouting match lasted long enough for a few neighbours to come outside, who later told me he had another dog in the house. Eventually, my wife pulls up and I wrap the doggo in the blanket and go home. I looked up the name of our local no-kill shelter, but they were closed until the following day. Guys, if you don't know what a no-kill shelter is, and I had to look this up myself, it is an animal shelter that does not kill healthy or treatable animals based on time limits or capacity, reserving euthanasia only for terminally ill animals, animals suffering poor quality of life, or those considered dangerous to public safety, so only if they really, really have to, based on medical advice. But this no-kill shelter was closed until the following day. My wife and I decided to call her Sally. I gave Sally a bath and went and bought some wet food, since she wouldn't eat dry kibble. She devoured it. I set her up a nice sleeping area in the garage for her to spend the night. First thing in the morning, I took Sally to the shelter and called animal control and told them what happened. They went to check her out, took a statement from me, and ended up at his house confiscating his other dog. Unfortunately, Sally was put down due to the horrible shape she was in. She was also very old. Now, here is where the revenge begins. This old jerk's house was on the route I took to walk my dog twice a day. My dog liked to take a dump about 2 houses before we reached his. Perfect. Now, I didn't need to carry bags of poop all the way back to my house. I started tossing them on his roof twice a day. At first, he would climb a ladder around once a week to get them down, but eventually I broke his will to do that. This went on for about a year before I moved. His roof was covered in poop bags. I also printed out flyers with his address and pictures of how I found Sally and put them in all the neighbours' mailboxes. I live across town now, but every couple of months I ride by and toss a bag of dog poop on his roof to let him know I'm still thinking about Sally. That is phenomenal. Okay, there we go. Phenomenal revenge. And look, obviously, I've got to say well done to OP for doing this and continuing to do this. Not only looking after Sally, saving the other dog's life. That's what you did there as well. But also letting this guy know what a horrible person he is for as long as you possibly can by doing what you're doing. But I can't really get over the fact that this is just so sad. Like, the revenge is great, but it's just so sad. Why are there people like this in the world that do this to animals? I don't get it. Let's move on. Hell hath no fury like 2 women scorned. Say goodbye to all your stuff. 15 years ago, I had a boyfriend that I'd been with for 6 years. He moved to another city for work while I finished my studies, and then I'd moved there too. He was apartment hunting, subleasing in the meantime. He came home almost every weekend and during Christmas and New Year's. He found an apartment in January and invited me up to show it, and I prepared to move up, looking for a job, looking for new furniture, etc. Late February, I told him it's time to terminate the lease on the apartment in our hometown, when he suddenly broke up with me. I was shocked and very sad. He collected some clothes and his very expensive PC, which he'd built from scratch. It was his baby. 2 weeks later, he updated his profile picture on Facebook to him and another woman kissing. Obviously, they hadn't been dating 2 weeks. And I want to interject here, even if they had, that still would be cheating. You can't just form a relationship in 2 weeks without something happening before. I'm sorry, it's impossible. I called him and called him out on it, and he admitted to having met her 2 months ago. He was at the airport to travel abroad with his buddy for the weekend, so we didn't talk long. That same evening, I decided to tell the new girlfriend. I managed to find her on Facebook, and I wrote to her. She didn't believe me at first, of course, but I sent her texts, pics, I described their apartment in detail. Well, actually, it was her apartment, as it turned out. When I sent her a D-pic that he sent me with their bedroom clearly in the background, she said, "Okay, enough, I believe you." She told me they'd been dating for 8 months, not 2. She'd been in Africa for 2 months in December and January, which would explain why he was able to be with me for 2 weeks over the holidays and why he could invite me to see the apartment. We wrote a lot. He'd sent us the exact same Valentine's Day text. He'd bought us the exact same Christmas present, etc. You get the picture. After comparing notes, it was time for revenge. She cut up all of his clothes and left them in a pile on the floor. I told her about the PC and advised her to tear that effer to pieces. She hacked it with screwdrivers and hammers, and every piece was beyond saving. When he came home on Sunday, she tossed him out with nowhere to go, but not before showing him all of his possessions obliterated. Oh my goodness me. Look, the clothes are one thing, but destroying a man's PC, goodness me. There's no coming back from that. Very justified. I love it. I mean, I know it's obviously different for me because I use my computer to work and I'm just on my computer all the time. But I've spent a lot of time and money on this computer. In fact, it kind of broke down not too long ago and I was completely effed. Turns out I just had to buy another graphics card and install that. But I'm not really a tech savvy guy when it comes to the hardware. And I found that challenging. Really challenging. But in this situation, I mean, it's completely justified. If I was doing this and I came back and one of my girlfriends had just destroyed my PC and I couldn't work and I couldn't do anything, I would have to hold my hands up and say, you know what, fair play, I deserve this. I honestly, I don't mean this, but genuinely, how do people do this? It's actually very impressive. Firstly, morally, I don't know how you can have 2 girlfriends at the same time and they don't know about each other and you think that's fine and you just keep going with it. That's crazy to me. But secondly, logistically, being able to keep up with it, knowing which conversations you've had with each individual, sending the same messages to people, the same gifts as well. I mean, that makes it easier, but it's just crazy to me how people can do it. Guys, have you ever done something like this before? Get in the comments. How did you do it? I want to know. Not saying I'll do it in future. Of course I won't. But I just want to know because it's really interesting. My neighbor liked to clean. 2001. I had just moved to a quiet neighborhood where my children, 1 and 3 years old, could play outside safely and grow up with neighborhood children. It was also nice for my cats, 3, to finally be able to run around outside. After the first week, it was our first garbage day. Everything neatly in closed bags and in our personal garbage container. In the morning, we had to place the container on the side of the road with the rest of the containers on our street. So it was there at 7 a.m, after which I started cleaning my house. I had a white floor because I liked it, and that way I knew for sure it was clean. I mopped daily. I was still extremely clean at that time because of crawling children. Then I did the shopping, and when I got home, I was in shock after opening my front door. My entire hall was full of unknown waste. Pieces of glass, sharp metal lids, pieces of food, cartons, plastics, clearly stuffed through the mail slot. I already saw a number of neighbours looking at me expectantly behind their windows and in front of their house. It was clear that they knew more. After asking around, I was told who had thrown that garbage in my house. Conscious neighbour had done this with much fanfare. Something snapped inside me. A bomb in my frontal lobe and all decency disappeared from my mind. Steam from my ears. I cleaned out the trash and put the kids in the living room. Then I cleaned the cat litter box. Normally, I throw the entire contents in a bag, but now I was a bit more precise. I only scooped the poop and urine clumps out of the box and divided it evenly into 2 small bags. Those thin ones that tear quickly. I took the bags and went to the neighbour further down the street. I rang the doorbell and kept the bags behind me. The lady opened the door with a smug grin on her face. The door opened wide and I could quickly see her hall. On the right, a carpeted staircase. On the left, the open door to the living room. The hall continued for another 1.5 meters to the back after the stairs and door, where the toilet was. Everything was super clean. I asked her devilishly calmly if she'd put that waste through my mail slot. Her answer was yes, followed by the reasoning that because I was new here, that the loose waste that was lying around the place containers must have been mine, because before we lived here, that never happened. This was the moment that all the blood vessels in my eyes burst. The calm was gone. In a tirade of abuse, I made it clear to her that I had not been the polluter, and that if she had any decency, she could have spoken to me instead of jumping to conclusions and dirtying my house and endangering my crawling children and animals by dumping that waste in my house like that. With the message that if she liked to clean up so much, here, please. And I threw the 2 bags in her hallway. One against the corner of the stairs and the other on the doorpost of the living room. Everything, really everything, was covered in poop and the splattered clumps of cat urine. With a warning/promise that if she ever thought of doing something like that again, I would smash all her windows, I turned around and went home. Everyone had seen and heard everything. I never heard anything from that neighbour again. No one ever thought of doing something like that to me again. I can still enjoy the face she pulled when she saw the bags flying. It was shock, fear, indignation, nausea, and despair all at once. There we go. Very similar to the first story of this episode. Again, phenomenal revenge. What an entry to the neighborhood, by the way. Just you come in happy, I've upgraded, got a great house in a great neighborhood for my young children to grow up in and have a nice life, and you're hit with this. Like, it's disgusting. What an entrance. Also, her reason is a complete joke. Like, that's not a reason to do this because there's been litter in that area before. Where's the logic there? It's just insane. I don't really know what she's trying to do. Just like kind of dominate you or just show that she's the boss of this neighborhood or something. It's so weird. I've never heard anything like that before. But yeah, clearly she's a terrible person. I wonder if you could actually press charges because, as you say, she genuinely is like massively endangering your children. They could easily die. Like if you were in the house and she chucked all this stuff through the letterbox, they could die in so many different ways. They could choke on anything. They could get a plastic bag on their head. They could like step in the glass. I mean, they're crawling everywhere. It's obviously going to happen. They're 1 and 3 years old. I think you should press charges against that, to be honest, if you have the evidence. But yes, great revenge nonetheless, I must say, and it's good that this is not going to happen anymore. Revenge on a hacker. One day, I get an email from a hosting provider telling me that attacks are being launched from our server and I need to look into it. I find that there is indeed a hacker in our server. He was using an app to anonymously control his bot network, among other things. I looked at the app he was using and discovered that it was an open source project. I then downloaded the code for this backdoor, modified it to log everything to a file, and replaced his app with my honeypot version. Over the next 6 months, I collected every scrap of information I could on this guy. I then used that information to take over many of his online accounts, including his main email account. That was the account where he had registered all of his services to, so I was able to issue password reset requests for everything he owned. I gained control of 6 other email accounts, 24 IRC accounts, his Facebook page, his dating profile, numerous websites, and the backup site he used for his cell phone. I have his phone number, his mum's number, and his girlfriend's number. I know his address, his birthday, the schools he went to, even his favorite foods and music. After I took every single online account he had ever had away from him, I sent a nasty email to his internet service provider in an effort to extort yet more information from them. In that email, I said some very unkind things about the monarch of Indonesia and how I might smear the monarch publicly if I didn't get the information. The hacker disappeared immediately after that. I've looked for him at times over the last 15 years since, and he's not resurfaced. The Indonesian lese-majeste laws regarding insults to the monarchy are not to be trifled with. The prison term for such an offence is 15 years. Okay, that is the end of the post, but I still have some more questions. Hopefully the comments down below will clear things up. I'm just not entirely sure where this takes place or what exactly the connotations are of this email to the ISP about the monarch of Indonesia and exactly what that means. But let's jump into the comments because OP has responded to a few people. First of all, he says that he did in fact use the wrong words to describe the Indonesian law. Indonesia has a president and there are severe penalties for defaming him. I do know for certain this hacker has not resurfaced yet, though I cannot provide this was the cause. The current Indonesian criminal code, to be repealed on the 2nd of January 2026, criminalizes defamation of the president and vice president of Indonesia, inherited directly from similar laws in the Netherlands. This was then inherited by Indonesia with threats of imprisonment from 18 to 54 months or a huge fine. Somebody replied to this saying, "You're not Indonesian, right? He's definitely wrong here, but sounds like you might have killed him." And then, just 40 minutes ago, at the time of recording, OP replied saying, "The idea that I may have gotten him killed is something that haunts me." Somebody else asked, what was the risk level to yourself by taking these actions? Are you in Indonesia yourself? And OP said, "I violated numerous national and international computer laws, and I've scratched Indonesia off of my travel list. But the only real danger is if I've harmed him. Then my past and current posts clearly show where I live." And finally, someone said, "This is cool. I don't know, but it sounds to me a little bit like it was written by a 15-year-old that definitely doesn't know how to do any of that, but thinks they do. Also, this isn't really nuclear." A lot of people in the comments were a little bit dubious if this was real or not, just because it is a little confusing. But then a little edit below from the same commenter saying, "Okay, actually, he did in fact send me a link to a site that looks like what he described, although half of it isn't in English, so I'm not sure. But I guess I stand corrected. My bad." And then someone down below has said, "Speaking as a computer guy, this sounds pretty legit, except for the open source botnet, that is." But then OP responds to this saying, "As a computer guy, you can appreciate that the hacker also altered my DNSG record to set my email server to some unknown IP address. Good times." And he didn't have a botnet on my server. He had something like a VPN that he used to hold persistent connections and control over IRC channels, which control bots. Pretty much, it seems to me, like reading through the comments, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. And there it is. And just to round things off, OP goes into a little bit more detail in another comment, just saying exactly what he sent that previous commenter who was a little bit dubious, saying, "There you go, I sent you a link to his old WordPress site that is still up, with his last post being from me with all the personal details and history of this hack. Sorry if 15 years in an Indonesian prison isn't nuclear enough for you." Somebody asked, "Well, why didn't you just post that here?" OP says it's against the sub rules on doxing, but then again has sent it to that person. Now, look, I don't have that. I can get it. I'm not sure exactly what it will do. I mean, I can message OP and try and get it for the video. Let me know down below if you guys want to see that in future. I'm not sure if I should necessarily be sharing that sort of information because, you know, again, that is doxing. But look, you can see on screen, if you are watching this on YouTube, that OP is actively sending this to people as evidence of this entire thing being legit. And to be honest, I can't quite believe how serious the ramifications are of what he's done for this hacker. But one thing's for sure, it's definitely nuclear, looking at the fact that you could be in prison for 15 years. Okay, so there we go. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I just wanted to give some more context there to prove that this story is real, because if you don't have that additional context that's provided by OP in the comments down below, I can kind of see how you might think that it's not 100% legit. I mean, it does sound a little bit weird. Just to sum up what I think has gone on there, I think he sent that email to the guy's ISP on his email. So he's hacked into the hacker's email and has sent that to the ISP. And then in that email, OP has included some very unkind things about the monarch of Indonesia. So there we go. Yeah, very interesting stuff. And yeah, as I said, just wanted to give some more context there so that you guys know it's legit, because I know quite a few times on this subreddit, we see stories that, let's be honest, probably aren't 100% true. I don't mind a little bit of exaggeration, but it's nice to know that when you do see a story like this, it is legit and it did happen and OP has the evidence. But yeah, there we go. I made my ex believe that I was dead. 6 months ago, he left me for his ex that he assured me was abusive and he had no feelings for. No apology, no explanation, just blocked me on everything, and I never heard from him again. He lied about everything, and I only found out by chance. It was heartbreaking. I almost ended my life the day I found out. Every day since, I just wanted him to know how much pain his actions could cause. I figured if he knew, then he wouldn't act that way. But instead of harassing him or begging, I left it alone for 6 months. I fell into a deep depression and I moved on with my life as best as I could. But I decided that if he ever did reach out, I would tell him I died. Make him regret treating me like trash and throw me away for all those months. Well, yesterday I get a long apology text from him about how he mistreated me. I see I'm unblocked everywhere. I responded to him as my sister and said that my family had been trying to contact him. I told him that OP passed away and left a note with his name, listing things she wanted to leave for him. He seemed in shock. I told him I could mail the stuff to him if he wanted it. He gave me his address and I'm mailing it tomorrow. He will never find out. We have 0 mutual friends, I never use social media, and our city is so big that we'll never run into each other. I hope he feels awful. I hope this teaches him to never again treat someone that disposably. He treated me like I was already dead to him, so I just made it a reality. Wow, there we go. What an evil start to this episode. And let me tell you, the revenge does not relent from here on out. Over the next 4 stories, things do not get any calmer than this. I mean, I will say this is pretty severe, but is it justified? Yeah, he did a terrible thing to you. I want him to live with that guilt for the rest of his life, and I hope he does. And if you ever do bump into him, just fake that you're somebody else. Say something along the lines of, oh yeah, actually I've heard of her and I've been told I look similar to her. Just give a fake name, whatever. I just want him to think forever that he did that to you and that he made you do that to yourself. So evil, so good. Now for our second revenge story. My sister-in-law got exactly what she deserved. My ex-sister-in-law was the type to put on airs and tell everyone how well-to-do she and her husband were. Christmas was hell because she always gave out a list of expensive gifts that she wanted and wouldn't accept anything not on the list. This was not a two-way street. For example, the year that sticks in my mind was the year she insisted I buy her a really expensive scarf from a local boutique. We couldn't afford it, so I spent 3 months looking for a scarf made from the same material and a pattern so close you'd never know the difference, unless you were my sister-in-law. She opened her gift and instantly looked at the label, huffed, rolled her eyes and put it on the floor next to her slippers and opened all her other gifts. No thank you or anything. The next day, she posted on social media about the, quote, pile of crap she got for Christmas, with a picture of the scarf. Most of her friends simpered over her being so butthurt and asked who I thought I was buying her such cheap crap. Some, though, said the scarf was gorgeous and was so similar to the expensive one that they really couldn't tell the difference. These people were quickly put down for also being cheap. Oh wow. Cue the petty revenge. I waited 12 months, refused to look at her gift list, and I ordered her gift. Christmas Day at her house again. She wouldn't go to her other family members' houses as they were all not as nice as her house, so we all had to spend our Christmas Day in the car for 2+ hours going to hers. I handed her a small envelope. She looked pleased. I later discovered she had asked for some gift vouchers for a really expensive jewelry shop. She excitedly opened it to find an Oxfam voucher for £50 to provide a foreign village with manure for their crops. The message I wrote was, quote, at least this year, when you tell everyone you got a pile of crap for Christmas, you won't be wrong. And then 4 X's as well. Everyone burst out laughing. She was unaware that I knew about the moaning from the previous year. The look on her face was worth all the nastiness from her until I finally divorced her jerk of a brother, who left me 3 weeks after my brain tumor diagnosis. Also, just for context, the year of the scarf, we were gifted her 2 children's school photos and 2 cheap picture frames from Tesco, and the year of the crap, we got tea towels. Okay, so there we go. It's not as if your ex-sister-in-law is giving you really expensive presents and then, yeah, fairly or not fairly expect them in return. I'd still say that, you know, you give whatever presents you want to give. You can't expect people to give you back the same level, or if you've got really expensive ones, then you can't expect super expensive ones back. But it would allow it a little bit more. Although what she's done here is just completely awful. She's just trying to pretty much profit from the holidays from her family. Terrible person. Clearly her brother's not much better. I will say that. But yeah, it's actually a great gift as well. An Oxfam voucher for £50. £50! decent chunk of money, and you're doing something good with it as well, providing a foreign village with manure for their crops. That's a lovely, lovely present. But no, she obviously hates it. To be honest, you're a better person than me. I don't think I would have gotten her anything. I would have just not gone. But yeah, at least you're doing a good thing and getting some phenomenally petty revenge at the same time. Considering getting my ex fired. I am a 26-year-old woman, and I met my ex, a 24-year-old man, at work. We were together for a year and a half, and we moved in together. We still work together at our corporate job, but in different departments. When we ended, we both avoided each other and tried to make civil, as a few co-workers knew we were together. He kept the apartment after I insisted we get a subleaser, because he would work late for a promotion and didn't want the hassle of moving. After weeks of back and forth, we settled that I will help pay a quarter of the rent for the rest of the lease. 1 month after I moved out, he moved in his high school ex-girlfriend from Canada. I didn't know how long she was staying, and I wanted to move on, so I didn't say anything. After 2 months of her staying there, I was sent a photo showing that they were engaged. I assumed the timeline was sped up because she'd need papers to stay and work. I was upset, and I cancelled my future checks for the apartment. Neither of us reached out about it. The next month, March, they got married in a small ceremony on my birthday weekend. My birthday was a Monday, and he got married the day before. At this point, we've been broken up for 5 months only. Yeah, I feel like myself again, but that hurt me, although ultimately I did nothing. Yesterday, he started reaching out via text about the rent money, since I cancelled the checks 2 months ago. I left him on read, but this ticked me off the most. I couldn't believe he'd want me to financially support him after all this time. When we were dating, he told me in confidence that he dropped out of college and made a fake certificate when he applied to his job. Not due to finances, but because he wanted to explore the world. Him reaching out and asking me to pay for him and his wife to live in the apartment we picked out together made me fume. My friends are split on whether I should tell my employer that he's a fraud. We work for a Fortune 500 company with a prestigious reputation. Some friends say I would ruin his future prospects. Others say he had it coming. And a third friend says that if it gets out, it might make me look like a bitter ex. He is a fraud. I'm just looking for guidance on if I should do it. I'm only planning to do this next month when the lease is up if he keeps insisting the money. Oof, very interesting. And before I give you my thoughts, actually, I will say that there is an update to this one, and OP has revealed what they ended up doing. But for me, I would say that if you can do this and get away with it anonymously, definitely do. But if there's any chance that it could negatively impact you, I would say don't bother. It's not worth it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But here is the update. It's on screen right now. I'm not going through with it. It's a fun fantasy, but I wouldn't be able to live with the guilt. I'm not paying him anymore. His wife is responsible for the rent since she lives there. I'm going to let it go now and live my life. I really do hope the best for him and wish him luck. I just got really heated with the audacity of the text. Well, I can't say I'm too happy with that resolution, but fair enough. It's OP's life, not mine. I cost a mobile home park potentially thousands after their tow company unfairly towed my car. I lived in a Texas mobile home park years ago when I was younger, and I woke up one day to find my car missing. When I called the police to report it stolen, I was informed that it had been towed. I fought with the park office and tow company on the phone all day, having to call in and miss work, but I had time off accrued, so I did get paid. They had towed my vehicle from my own driveway in the middle of the night. It wasn't on the street or a broken down eyesore or anything that would warrant a tow, so I couldn't imagine what their reasoning for towing could have been. Well, the tow company claimed I was partially parked on the grass, which wasn't allowed. Maybe half of my passenger side tyres were on the grass, but I honestly don't think it was even that much. Anyway, the reason why my tyres even touched the grass was because the driveway pavement was crumbling and deteriorating around the edges from age and the extreme Texas heat. So if you had two cars parked side by side, like my spouse and I did, one car had to be slightly on the grass because of the poor deteriorating condition of the park's driveway that was making it smaller and smaller with each passing year, as grass began to grow up through the cracks and encroach over the edges. Now, after getting absolutely nothing but apathetic hostility from both the park office and the tow company, I called city code enforcement and got them to come out to inspect my driveway that same day. They found that the drive did not meet code, which required it to be so many feet wide by so many feet deep. In fact, it missed these dimensional requirements by quite a bit after years of deferred maintenance. The inspector then went to the office to inform them of this violation, In addition, the code enforcer told the park office that they'd be doing an inspection of the entire park, 188 lots, in the coming weeks, and that the park would have to bring every driveway in violation up to code within 30 days or face ongoing penalties per violation until they were all fixed. This meant they were going to be on the hook for thousands of dollars in repairs and perhaps additional thousands in fines if they didn't correct every violation noted within the allotted time frame. So I got my car back from the tow company at the end of the day without having to pay any fees. Once I was there, they gave me a restrained attitude and tried to make me just get my car and get out. But I made a big deal about taking a dozen photos of my car from every angle to document any potential damage they may have inflicted during the tow and storage process. It was such sweet revenge. Now this is good karma right here. They were trying to just get as much money from you and probably from the rest of the neighborhood as well as they possibly could. I mean, really? Like a tiny bit of your car's on the grass and that's worth towing your car for? Come on, that's insane. But in reality, yeah, they just needed to be checked. And it's great karma because they're trying to get loads of money from you, but in the end, they're the one that's having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for being so petty themselves. Well done to you. Well done to anyone else in the neighborhood who might have done something similar. But it looks to me as if though you are the one that has saved your neighbors a load of cash, because they're probably doing this to everyone, and forced them to pay a lot of money. Now for our final story of this episode. Landlord had to pay big. When I, a 62-year-old woman, was about 19 years old, I rented a small one-bedroom duplex. The other part of the duplex was a 2-bedroom unit that the landlord's daughter lived in. The landlord's house was on the same property, and there was a shared driveway that split and went to each place. This will come up later. My rent was due on the 10th of each month. The landlord had the utilities all in one and charged me in the middle of the month according to usage. One month, I walked up to her house to pay the rent. I always paid it on the first Wednesday of the month. She didn't answer the door. I tried again later in the day and still no answer. I tried again the next day, still no answer, and I knew she was home. This time I had the check in an envelope and I left it in the door slot. This was on the 6th of the month. I had a feeling that something was up. The landlord was avoiding me. The next day I came home from work and there was a 24-hour notice to vacate for non-pay. I tried contacting the landlord, she wouldn't respond. This was on the 8th of the month. The next day the landlord shut off my electricity and gas heat. It happened to snow that day. I went down to the legal aid office, and although they couldn't go to court with you, they could give advice. And the attorney called my landlord to see if they could help resolve whatever was going on. The attorney advised who he was and where he was from. The landlord barely let him get this out. She started screaming at him so loud that I could hear her. She said, "No freaking government employee or anyone is going to tell me how to run my properties." And she hung up. The attorney looked at me and said, "We're going to fry her bar." This is where the driveway comes into play. It's a single dirt road which splits and goes to my place or further to her house. By the time I got home and was pulling in my driveway, there was a sheriff's car in front of her house. Apparently, the legal aid attorney had filed a restraining order against my landlord due to her shutting off my gas heat, which was a threat against me. The landlord called legal aid and she was told she needed to get an attorney since she wasn't willing to work with a government employee. After all was said and done, I got 45 days to move, 3 months rent, utilities, and deposits paid, plus $5,000. That was a lot of money back then, probably 10 times what it would be today. Yeah, remember, OP is now 62. This event took place 43 years ago. And the reason for all of this? Her other daughter was moving from Hawaii and she wanted the unit for her. Instead of just giving me a 30-day no-cause notice, she did it her way, and it cost her a lot of money. I never did talk to her again, but I do know she couldn't use her driveway until I moved. Well, there we go. What a good way to end it. Nobody likes a landlord at the best of times, but one that, you know, as they all seem to do these days, takes advantage of their current tenant. Yeah, and you're right. Like, why not just say, "Look, I'm sorry, my daughter's moving back and I want the house for her. Here's your 30-day notice." That's fine. What is wrong with that? That would have been fine. Other than doing this stuff, which is just ridiculous. And yeah, it was obviously going to land her in some sort of legal trouble. Like, she's very stupid. There are easier ways of doing this. Oh well, I guess she got what she deserved. So there we go. That is the end of that one. And yeah, after listening to that, I mean, you can probably understand, guys, why Reddit revenge stories I think I'll actually go out on a limb here, and it is close between entitled people stories and revenge stories, but I think that revenge stories might just be my favorite niche or sort of genre of stories on Reddit. It's close, as I said, but you know, it's just a different level. The level of planning that sometimes goes into these stories, the fact that they take place sometimes over literal decades, if not generations, it's just so good and sometimes so satisfying. But there we go. That is it. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one.